Yo guys, it's RyugaXD. You already know YouTube has its limit size, so if you want to see the spicier, uncensored, and exclusive stuff I can't post here, check out my Patreon. That's where I drop all my 18+ lemon content, early uploads, and more. Links in the description. Come join the fun. In Kanahagakure, the day was sunny. Many of the residents of the villages were out having a good time. It was finding a peaceful spot and taking in the sounds of nature for some, soaking up the sun's rays for others, or socializing with friends in the food district or market. A small family was having a good day in their own way in one of the main compounds owned by one of Kanahagakure's most powerful shinobi clans. Meeting rooms and clan officials' offices were located on the northern side of the Kuchiki clan compound, while the communal dining and living areas were located on the western side. The east side contained the dojos, smith shops, and sparing grounds for those who did not want to eat at home, while the south side contained study and learning rooms with theater stages for historical performances and plays. The legendary Kuchiki Library was situated there as well. On the north side of the compound, there was a lengthy walkway that led to the only exit door. There was a courtyard behind the first layer of the double-layered wall where people could wait or be stopped before entering the compound. The Kuchiki clan symbol was emblazoned on the outer doors and above the inner doors of a thick castle gate that was modeled after those found on the Fire Damias castle above the entrance leading into the compound. The compound was surrounded by walls that were more than 10 feet high, with dark gray shingles covering the immaculate white walls and roofs that extended a few feet outside. Only the Hokage was aware of the compound's barrier seal, which covered the whole area and barred anyone from entering without the clan's approval. The main courtyard, which is located in the middle of the compound and features a sizable grassy field with a medium-sized koi pond near the eastern side that is teeming with vibrant fish, was one of several peaceful courtyards that varied in size and design. Additionally, there were 2 shrines devoted to Fujin and Ryujin, with chandeliers at their front entrances and numerous paper lanterns adorning the exterior. The wooden temples housing the statues of these great deities had roofs that reached the same height as the clan head home of the Kuchiki compound. 2 parents were observing their young son playing with a small komainu in the main courtyard in the middle of the compound. The young child was crawling after the komainu, which was bouncing around. However, the boy didn't appear to mind. As he crawled after him, he let out shouts of delight and giggled. The father had a good build, fair skin, and slate-gray eyes. His long black hair fell past his shoulders, and the long triangle-shaped headpieces, known as kenseiken, held it up. There were 3 of them next to each other in the middle of his head, and 2 on his right side, just above his ear. The back of his hand and wrist were covered in white, fingerless teko. He wore a black kosode with his clan symbol on the back and a white shitagi. A black hexagon with 2 feathered wings facing each other and attached to a graceful half-moon with 2 clouds on each wing in the upper corners, as well as a tiny sakura flower resting between the wings at the moon's points, is his clan symbol. His knee-length black shinobi sandals were concealed beneath his black hakama, which he wore with a white hakama himo. His hakama himo contained a plain-looking katana with a window-like open frame, a bronze tsuba with a lavender tsukaito, and a white samigawa secured in a white sheath by a brass kashira. The mother had a slim build, fair skin, and a bust similar to Tsunade Senju's. Her face was framed on both sides by shoulder-length bangs and long, flowing, bright red hair that fell to her ankles. A simple black hairclip concealed a tiny violet diamond in the middle of her forehead while parting her bangs to the left side. She wore a white kimono that hung past her ankles without touching the floor, and her eyes were a vivid violet. She was wearing a kimono with red cuffs and a red stripe that ran along the edges and encircled the wearer. It was embroidered with her clan symbol, which was a red spiral with a black line following its motion inside a black circle. Her husband's clan symbol also appeared on the back of her kimono. She also wore red shinobi sandals that reached her ankles. Her outfit differed from the typical kimono in that it was extremely loose past her waist, enabling her to fight even though she was dressed so formally. Her hakama himo, which held her own sword, was hidden by her red obe, which matched the color of her hair. Her sword featured a white samigawa over a silver oval tsuba engraved with a spiral design of red tsukaito. Beneath the wraps, which were secured by a silver kashira inside an equally red sheath, were 2 red spirals. A white mask with long, narrowed eyes that would conceal the user's eyes if they widened, a set of long teeth that seemed longer than typical human teeth, a pointed chin, and a set of holes where the cheeks were all on the back of her hakama himo. The frontmost piece was slightly thicker than the other pieces, making it more noticeable, and it was connected to the 2 closest pieces, creating the appearance of a crown. One set of lines extended from the tear ducts to the area just above the teeth, and another set ran from the top of the eyes to the end of the mask. There was a red pattern across the forehead that gave the impression that waves were moving across the forehead and pointing down toward the eyes. Two thick red lines that resembled waterfalls fell from this pattern over the cheeks to the bottom of the jaw, but the pattern did not cover the teeth. Their son shared his parents' fair skin, his mother's red hair, and his father's slate-gray eyes. He had both symbols on the back of his kimono and was dressed in a bright red kimono with a white hakama himo and red hakama obi. The two parents joyfully observed their son pursuing the komenu, one of his father's summonses. They moved to get him because they didn't want him to be exposed to the sun for too long. The young boy stopped pursuing the little komenu and crawled toward his parents after spotting them. His mother made the decision to have a little fun as they got closer to their son. She stooped to pick him up. She retreated half a step from him as he approached her. This action confused her son, who stopped moving and gave a cute little tilt to his head. "Come on, Naru-chan, come to Ka-chan," she said in a melodic voice as she giggled a little and urged him to approach. He crawled forward, encouraged by his mother, only to have her retreat a few more half steps. As his wife took a step back to see how far his suma's trick would go, his father watched with amusement and made sure he was beside her. His son puffed up his cheeks in frustration at her teasing, and he smiled slightly in amusement. He didn't cry at his mother's taunting, and they were both content. It only seemed to motivate him. His subsequent behavior, however, caught both parents off guard. He started to stand on wobbly legs after pushing himself up with his hands rather than crawling forward. Both parents were taken aback by this, and his mother's eyes started to well up with tears as she saw him approach her with unsteady steps. "Come on, Naru-chan, come to Ka-chan," she exclaimed joyfully, pushing him on. His mother swiftly gathered the child into her arms before he could fall to the grass below. As her husband gave them both a warm hug, she was crying because she was so happy at the moment. Those who watched the scene, some with the hexagon and others with the spiral on their backs, found it endearing and made them smile. The boy attempted to put his little arms around his mother in return for the embrace, seemingly trying to imitate what his parents were doing. In the main room of her family, Kushina was sitting with her son. When feeding Naruto, she would withdraw to her bedroom or here. She would also occasionally feed him in her husband's office, though this was uncommon because it was never known if he would have an unexpected meeting. They both agreed that Naruto would be treated unfairly if she had to stop feeding him in order to leave the room and go somewhere else. That's not to say he didn't pay his father a visit at work. In fact, he did so a few times. Byakuya's days were always made brighter by seeing his wife and son. The door to Byakuya's office was knocked on. He called to his guest, "Come in." When the door opened, he saw his wife carrying their son, who was staring at him with such joy that he was able to give him a little wave. With the faintest hint of a smile, he said, "Well, what do I owe the pleasure of such a visit?" After all, he couldn't afford to be too unprofessional while he was at work. Kushina smirked playfully and said, "Well, Kuchiki-sama, someone really important wanted to meet with you." He extended his arms to embrace his son, saying, "Well, let me not keep this important fellow waiting." Byakuya held out his finger for his son to play with while the family sat together. Naruto eventually extended his hands to his mother, but both parents were taken aback by what transpired next. The two parents gazed at their son with wide eyes and widening smiles as a tiny voice filled the room with the single word, "Ka-chan." Kushina was ecstatic and asked, "What did you say, Naru-chan?" "Ka-chan," he repeated. Kushina gathered her little Naru-chan in her arms and rubbed her cheek against his as tears welled up in the corners of her eyes, moving faster than even Minato's Hiraishin. "Can you say it again for Ka-chan?" "Ka-chan," he said again. Kushina squealed, "Oh, my little Naru-chan is so smart and adorable." Byakuya glanced down at his son over his wife's shoulder and allowed a tiny smile to appear on his face. "Ka-chan," was his squeak-back response to the question, "Naru, can you say to-san?" As dark clouds appeared to form overhead in response to Byakuya's mood, he let out a long sigh and became a little depressed. While laughing at his expense, Kushina tried to reassure him by gently patting him on the back and saying, "Don't worry, Byakuya-kun, he will be saying, to-san, before you know it." Age 1. 2 years later, Naruto was seated across from his mother in one of the large compound's private classrooms. Both of them were seated in front of a small table that required people to kneel in front of it. An ink table with a medium brush and a scroll supported by two thin stone planks was placed in front of the boy. The boy was practicing his calligraphy by drawing brush strokes across the scroll. The woman exclaimed, "You're getting better, Naru-chan." With excitement, the boy grinned broadly in return for her joy. His smile, though, had momentarily diverted his attention from his brushwork, causing some of it to deviate from its intended form. Naruto attempted to erase it out of panic at his error, but his mother intervened. She reassured Naru-chan, "It's okay. There's no need to panic." The boy's eyes continued to well up with tears despite this. Kushina had gathered her son around the table and given him a firm embrace. With a sincere tone, she said, "Naru-chan, it's okay. This is why we practice, to improve ourselves and not make the same mistakes." He almost burst into tears as he said, "BB, but I just want to make you and Tusan proud. Oh, we are always proud of you. You are our son and we will always be proud of you." A hand suddenly touched his shoulder. When Naruto looked up, he saw his father standing over him. He nodded his head with a sly smile, seemingly reaffirming what his mother had said. Kushina's eyes gleamed mischievously when she saw Byakuya. The Kuchiki heir was taken aback when she grabbed his Shitagi sleeve and pulled him into an unexpected family hug, causing him to smile as he embraced his family. There was a lot of activity going on in the Kuchiki compound. In addition to being the day of the Kyuubi festival, October 10th was also the birthday of Naruto Kuchiki Uzumaki, the grandson of the head of the Kuchiki clan and the clan heir of the Uzumaki clan. "Hey Strawberry!" exclaimed a rather short woman wearing the typical Kuchiki clan outfit, which included a black hakama with a white hakama himo, a black kosode with his clan symbol on the back, and knee-length black shinobi sandals concealed beneath the hakama. Her hakama himo contained a seemingly ordinary katana with a rectangular brass tsuba that was filled in and had a rust-red tsukaito over a brass-colored samigawa that was held in place by a brass kashira inside a black sheath. Her smooth black hair, which also covered her ears, fell slightly past her shoulders and appeared to converge at her neck before flailing out to the sides. She had light skin and purple eyes. She has two long, thin bangs that fall past her shoulders and a long, thick strand that falls between her eyes and curves to the left, nearly reaching the opposite side of her cheek. A tall, thin-built man who looked to be in his early 20s was the target of her yelling. His complexion is peach, and his slightly spiky orange hair falls past his forehead. He wore a black kosode with the Uzumaki spiral on the back over a red shitagi. He wears red knee-high shinobi sandals with armor plates over his shins and a black hakama with a red hakama himo. He had a blood-red shoulder guard with two white stripes running through it, a piece of armor on his left hip in the same style, and a set of strapped armor over his kosode with a high collar that rises slightly up the neck. He wore a calf-length white cloth around his waist that was held up by his hakama himo. It was an open front apron with tattered sides and thick black stripes that ran the length of the apron and were equally spaced. A white mask that resembles a skull and is attached to his hakama himo also has smaller eye holes, a larger array of teeth that extend from the top of the wearer's chin to just under their nose, and prominent lines on the side that run from the tear ducts to the top of the front teeth and from the top of the eye holes to the side of the mask. 4 red lines are visible, one in the middle of the forehead, one directly above the eye, and 2 in between that converge above the right eye and fall to a point above the teeth, 2 beneath the right eye that converge before pointing down at the teeth, and 3 on the bottom, 1 rising from the chin, 1 directly beneath the jaw, and 1 in between that converge together before creating a single line pointing up at the lower jaw. Unlike his fellow Uzumaki, he carried his sword on his back, with bandages running down from the handle to the blade's tip. A secret seal secured the blade to a blood-red sash, keeping it from falling or separating without his drawing. Slightly taller than the man himself, the black single-bladed sword has a flat bottom just above the handle. The silver-edged blade, which occupies half of the sword, is shaped like the underside of a kite. Rather than having a more conventional handle, the sword's tang is wrapped in the same cloth that covers the blade, which is strengthened by Uzumaki seals to keep it from ripping or tearing. "Are you finished setting up the decorations for my nephew yet?" "Shut up, you midget," the man yelled in response. "And yeah, I got the streamers and banners set up in the eating hall with other streamers in the surrounding rooms that has stuff for the party." Really didn't feel like risking Kushina-sama's wrath for not helping with the party, he says while scrubbing the back of his forehead. He yelled, "And don't forget, he's my nephew too, you damn midget." Before the short woman he was yelling at swiftly covered his mouth. "Quite, you idiot," she said in a terrified whisper. "Do you want Kushina-sama to hear you cursing?" The man took her hand away from his mouth before glancing around as though surveying the area. He turned his gaze back to the woman before him. After he finished his question, the woman appeared anxious and avoided making eye contact. "What about you, midget? You finish hanging the streamers in the walkways leading to where the party is being held?" he asked. His face lit up with a broad smile that threatened to turn into a fit of laughter. He held his side and pointed at the shorter woman, exhaling, "You couldn't do it, could you?" Her rage was building as he laughed, and a tick mark was appearing on her forehead. "Shut up, you damn strawberry head," she yelled, furious. As soon as she realized what she had said, Kushina appeared inexplicably behind her, her hair seeming to wave like waving tails and an ominous red aura rolling off her in waves that seemed to darken the surrounding area. "Rukia dear," she said in a lovely tone with a hint of menace. She looked between Rukia and Ichigo and said in a more menacing tone, "I was in the kitchen making my sweet Naru-chan's cake when I suddenly hear words that my little Naru should not be hearing. Can either of you tell me why that is?" Sweat trickled down their bodies as if they were standing in the rain, and the two could only watch in terror. The last thing the two saw before their unconscious bodies ended up on the ground in a heap was the Uzumaki clan matriarch's fist slamming into their heads while she yelled, "No foul language around Naru-chan dattabane." After the loud noise was stopped and the punishment for the foul language was administered, Kushina was left looking horrified. "Oh no, I just put the cake in the oven," she almost yelled as she fled back to the kitchen to save Naruto's birthday cake, leaving a dust cloud rising as she did so. As she was leaving, Byakuya noticed that Naruto, his younger sister Rukia, and Kushina's cousin Ichigo were lying in a heap in the center of the walkway. Their heads had what looked like lumps on them, which were undoubtedly caused by his crazy wife. On such a significant day, he simply shook his head at the two for provoking her anger. Naruto, on the other hand, just observed his uncle and aunt lying on the ground with curiosity. Everyone was dressed in kimonos or clan shihakusha, the decorations were set up throughout the Kuchiki compound, and the Uzumaki clan matriarch had proudly and lovingly made the cake for the boy of honor. It was now 6 o'clock in the evening. Members of the Kuchiki clan patrolled or stood watch throughout the compound to ensure that newcomers followed the streamers' designated path and that the celebration was not interrupted in any way. While his grandson was playing with his parents in the main dining hall, Byakuya's father, Ginrei Kuchiki, the current head of the Kuchiki clan, was waiting to greet the guests at the inner entrance to the compound. He had 2 guards for himself and 4 more for the compound's perimeter. Ginrei was a tall, slender man with long, gray hair that fell to his shoulders, a thick, bushy gray mustache that gave the impression that he was always frowning, and slate gray eyes. His face is long and narrow, with noticeable wrinkles on the forehead and cheeks, as well as prominent cheekbones. The white scarf of the Kuchiki clan head, woven by master weaver Sujishira Kuromon III, complemented his fair complexion. The scarf is made of Ginpaku Kazuhana no Uzuganu, gauze of silver-white flurry of snow in clear skies, a family heirloom that has been passed down from generation to generation and given to each head of the Kuchiki clan. Its value is equal to that of Tsunade Senju's necklace. In honor of Fujin, the patron deity of the Kuchiki clan, he was dressed in a white nagajuban with a navy blue kimono that was accentuated by a forest green eri shin. Gray and white horizontal lines were sporadically positioned throughout his kimono to create accents, and a range of leaf patterns followed the lines. He was carrying his katana in a white hakama himo wrapped over a bright red obi that held the formal attire closed. His katana's rectangular, filled in brass suba and red sukaito, which resembled his daughter-in-law's color, were held together by a bronze kashira. The scabbard was also white. One of the few guards stationed at the front gate for the evening would let the guests in as they arrived, allowing the barrier to have a small hole made in it so that the guests could enter while the barrier's existence remained a secret. The clan's Keke Genkai, Ritsu, soon began to pulse, warning the welcoming party that the first visitor had arrived. Hiyashi Hyuga, the head of the Hyuga clan, his wife Hitomi, his daughter Hinata, who was Naruto's age, his brother Hizashi, his son Neji, who was a year older, and his wife Naotomi were the first people to appear when the gate opened. All of them were Hyuga clan members, as evidenced by the white, featureless eyes that housed the clan's Byakugan. All of the party's men had black hair, but the women's hair was dark purple. Both Hiyashi and Hizashi had strong, rectangular faces and long black hair that fell past their shoulders. However, Hiyashi's face appeared more stern, almost adorned with a very serious look, while his brother's appeared somewhat softer. Both of them had lightly tanned skin. Hiyashi wore a cream-colored kimono and hakama, while Hisashi wore a dark blue set with gray accents around the edges. Both had white nagajiubans underneath, with Hiyashi's white airy shin peeking through. Hisashi wore mute gray, dark brown shinobi sandals, while Hiyashi wore a navy blue obi and a long-sleeved, green hat made of forest underbrush. Neji shared his father's and uncle's sleek hairstyle, as well as his mother's slightly lighter skin and soft features that revealed his advanced age. Like his mother, he wore his hair in a low ponytail, unlike his father and uncle. Despite having the same gray edge highlight as his father, he was dressed in a slightly brighter blue kimono and hakama. Like the others, he wore a white nagajiuban, a blue shinobi sandal, and a mute green obi. Both Natomi and Hitomi were dressed in matching light purple kimonos, with Natomi's having bright red highlights and Hitomi's having royal purple highlights. Natomi's kimono was on the opposite side of Hitomi's, but it had a similar floral design that crawled up her right side. Both Hinata and Hitomi wore white nagajiubans underneath their kimonos, just like her father and husband. The three women had white obi edges peeking out from behind their royal blue obis, while Hitomi and Hinata wore white tabi and white with purple highlights zori. Natomi wore silent purple shinobi sandals. Hitomi was a stunning woman with delicate, soft features that complemented her slim figure and round, oval-shaped face. Her long, purple hair fell to her hips and was secured in a bun with two long pins. Her daughter appeared to have inherited her Byakugan's subtle purple tint. Two shoulder-length side bangs, left down for the event, framed her face. She appeared to have light skin, almost pale, which is typical of Hyuga women. Like Hitomi, Natomi had a thin build and light, almost pale skin. Her round face and slightly firmer features gave the impression that she was more willing to engage in rougher activities. In contrast, her hair was short, purple, and fell to her upper back. It was tied up in a high ponytail that fell smoothly down her back. As old as Naruto, Hinata had a fair complexion, a round face, and soft features like her mother. Her hair was styled in a bowl cut like short Heim cut, with two side bangs that framed her face and fell to her chin. She was dressed in a sky blue highlighted deep blue kimono with an ivy-like pattern that appeared to crawl over it. The Hyuga clan emblem, which consists of a red flame enclosed by a yellow circle, was worn on the backs of every clan member. Hiyashi said, "Greetings Kuchiki-sama," while bowing just enough to indicate that he was making the gesture but not enough to indicate submission. His action was followed by the other members of his party. "Greetings Hyuga-sama," was Ginrei's response to the gesture. "I welcome you to the Kuchiki compound to celebrate young Naruto's day of birth." With a haughty tone, Hiyashi answered, "It is our pleasure to celebrate such a day with you and your family." Holding his expression in check, Ginrei simply gestured with his hand, and one of the numerous clansmen near the entrance, all wearing light-skinned, semi-spiky black hair and clan robes, stepped forward. "He will be your escort and guard while you are in the Kuchiki compound. This is Surachi," he said, bowing to the Hyuga entourage. "Please follow me, Hyuga-san," he said, turning to the side and waving his left hand for them to do so. Ginrei noticed a slight twitch in Hiyashi's brow and the corner of his mouth at his honorific. The next family arrived as the Hyuga were making their way into the compound. The Shihin clan, which consists of Yoruichi Shihin, the head of the clan, her husband Kazuki Shihin, and their daughter Tear Harabel Shihin, is related to the Kechiki in the same way that the Uzumaki are related to the Senju. Yoruichi, who is of average height, is a slim but athletically fit woman who was extremely well endowed, as evidenced by the fact that her assets could be seen even though she was wearing a kimono. She had long purple hair that reached her butt, golden irises, and dark skin. Her hair was typically pulled back to her mid-back in a high ponytail. The bangs that fell on her sides flare out nearly parallel to the ground, and she also has side bangs that reach her chin. Her long hair was secured in a side bun for the evening, and a big purple rose hairpin with several tiny leaves encircling the flower was used as an accessory. Every member of the Shihin family wore white airy shin collars, as was appropriate for a family of that station. She was dressed in a purple and white kimono, with the colors of the Nagajuban reversed on the outer layer, with the white half on the right and the purple half on the left. Along with a wide variety of flowers, such as sunflowers, lilies, and roses, to name a few, that extended from the bottom to the collar and around the sleeves, the kimono was adorned with some waves on the inside of the furisad. The patterns on the white side allowed light lilacs to be seen, while the other colors were a variety of pale blues and purples with some greens to highlight the leaves that would be seen from the stems of the flowers. Behind her dull green obi, which was tied off with a dull red obijime with two upward-facing loops going into the knot, she displayed a light blue obi-age. She also wore lilac zori with rust-red cushions and white tabi socks. Over her obi, which contained her kodachi, she wore a lilac hakama himo. Her kodachi featured a rectangular suba, kashira, and dull brass. It was kept in a rusty red scabbard and featured a rusty red tsukaito over a white samigawa. Kazuki Shihan is a tall, slender man with gray eyes and fair skin. He wears a bucket hat with green and white stripes, and his untidy, almost pale light blonde hair falls just below his chin. A few strands framed his face, and a thick lock split halfway down the bridge of his nose and fell down the center of his face. The man usually had some stubble on his chin, but it appeared that he had shaved it off for this occasion. He was dressed in a white nagajuban, a slightly off-white kimono, and a hakama with a broad gold tamori framed by dark yellow piping. He was dressed in an olive green haori with a light tan lining and forest green embroidery around the edge. A thick dark brown obijime and a light brown obi were tied off his kimono and tied into an overlapping bow with a long strand that hung down to his knees. Additionally, he wore black tabi socks with a pair of black zori that had an extra set of straps that connected to the ankles and enabled shinobi to use them. In contrast to the other Shihan family members, Kazuki's sword was not a katana. It lacked the curve shared by all of the katana series, even though it still had a single blade. Instead of a suba, there was a dull brass, U-shaped guard with a lotus flower carved at the bottom that extended 3 inches up the blade. A short chain that was half the length of the handle on the front side of the guard was used to loop a bright red string around the bottom of the guard 3 times before looping back into a bow. Prior to the Keisahira, the handle had a slight bend and was marginally longer than a typical katana. The tsukaito was a dull black, and the samigawa was a dull brown. 4 dull brass caps made up the kashira, the final cap featuring an equally red tassel. With a slightly thicker blade and a black scabbard, it was marginally longer than a typical katana. Naruto was the same age as their daughter, Heir Haribel Shihan. She wore a sky blue nagajuban underneath a navy blue kimono with a white trim that extended from the collar to the obi-age and the ends of the kimono's sleeves. The kimono faded to an ocean blue when it reached her waist. There were big pictures of pink and yellow wildflowers with faded green stems connecting them as the kimono's colors changed. She had an addition in the form of a tight-fitting high-collar mask that fell to her shoulders and covered the lower half of her face. It was the same shade of navy blue as the top of her kimono, which also had white trim that matched the seam that kept it closed by following the outside of the collar and down the center of the front. Its 2 tiny, round, white air filters would be level with the bones of her cheeks. Her bright purple obijime and white obi-age complemented her light yellow obi, and she wore a white fur boa around her neck. In addition, she is sporting blue and white padded zori with waves on the sides and white tabi socks. With her dark olive skin, sea green eyes, thick blonde eyelashes that would make someone question whether she is wearing mascara, and golden blonde hair that seems semi-spiky with a strand that falls down the middle of her face like her father's, Heir seems like a peaceful little girl. There are 3 braided locks, one on each side of her face and one that falls down her back, each stopping halfway down her chest and back. Her hair appears to fall just below her ears, with some even reaching her chin. Instead of the typical cylindrical hair ties that function like finger trap puzzles with a thick outer ring and one in the center that is a brighter shade of green than her eyes, the braids are held together with shinobi wrappings for the occasion. The Shinan family emblem appears on the back of their clothing. A white hexagon with 2 layers is the emblem of the Shinan family. 4 black 5-pointed stars, the lower 2 of which are more prominent, are located at the top, bottom, left, and right edges of the hexagons. A line from the bottom of the stars leads to a diamond with an upward-facing black crescent moon and a black teardrop falling into it, while a set of white lines, one on each side, emerge from the sides of the stars before bending at a 90-degree angle and traveling to the star opposite it, where they bend again into the side of the opposing star. On either side where the teardrop was absent, 3 tiny black triangles surrounded the moon, their points pointing toward the edges of the diamond. Ginrei bowed briefly and said, "Welcome, Lady and Lord Shinan." Yoruichi returned the bow and said, "We are glad to be here." After the formalities were completed, Kazuki grinned arrogantly, and Yoruichi grinned broadly. Yoruichi asked, seemingly excited, "How is the family Ginrei?" His tone and expression were devoid of emotion as he said, "They are fine, Yoruichi-san." "Just as lively as ever," Kazuki said, his constant smile cutting through. Exasperated by his hands approaching, Yoruichi gave Ginrei a rough pat on the shoulder. "Well, let's go on in and enjoy the party," she exclaimed, pumping her fist into the air as a Kichiki guard approached to escort the Shinin family to the party area, all the while Tear bowed her head slightly in response to her parents' behavior on such a formal occasion. Ginrei sighed deeply as the Shinin passed him. Ginrei asked himself, can those two maintain any professionalism? His guards puffed out their chests to regain their own professionalism after the recent encounter that left many questioning the sanity of the two older Shinin. However, considering that Lady Kushina can change her attitude just as easily as Yoruichi, he returned to his professional manner after a few seconds. The Senju and the remaining Uzumaki who live in the Senju compound, including Tsunade Senju, Nagato Uzumaki, Shizune Kato, Tsunade Senju's unofficial daughter, Yahiko and Konan Senju Uzumaki, and their daughter Rangaku Senju Uzumaki, arrived next. Tsunade Senju, the granddaughter of Shodai Hokage Hashirama Senju, and Mito Uzumaki, who later became Senju and is currently the head of the Senju clan, led the group. Tsunade is a stunning, curvaceous woman with straight bleach blonde hair, hazel eyes, and porcelain white, flawless skin. She was taller than average. Her hair was styled in her trademark two loose ponytails, framing her face with two shoulder-length bangs. Before she died, Mito Senju taught her and Kushina the strength of 100 seal, which is symbolized by the violet diamond in the middle of her forehead. Despite wearing a kimono, she had a noticeably large bust that nearly overshadowed her obijime. She also had bright red nail polish on her fingernails and typically on her toes. Despite being in her 50s, she was regarded as one of the most beautiful women alive. However, because of her Senju and Uzumaki ancestry, she was probably in her mid-20s. Because the Uzumaki and Senju are cousin clans, they are both renowned for their extraordinary vitality and longevity. Those who are descended from either clan or both can live for hundreds of years before passing away from advanced age, and they can also develop chakra abilities that rival those of Jinchurikis. Young Naruto would live as long as if she were a full-blooded Uzumaki because the Kuchiki clan developed a similar genealogy for their closeness to the Komeinu, who were blessed by the gods as guardians and protectors. In this case, the genealogy was knowledge. She wore a bright green kimono with a white airy shin underneath the collar, a forest green interior liner, and embroidery that extended past the hem of her kimono with furisod-style sleeves. She wore a white nagajuban. White roses of various sizes adorned the kimono and furisod, and the bottom of the sleeves had 3 layers of half-circles that rose up to resemble ocean waves. Her sunrise yellow obijime complemented her earthen brown obi. On her left side, the obi was tied with a bow and surrounded by a bright red obiage. A similar tie was used in place of one of her hair ties, but this one featured a big red rose. The Senju clan symbol was displayed in black on the back of her kimono. It was made up of 2 horizontal pentadents with curved prongs instead of square ones, joined by 2 short staffs with a short vertical line where they met. Shizune, her unofficial adopted daughter, was on her left. Her deep pink kimono, which turned gold as it passed the obi, was worn with a white nagajuban. The kimono featured a gold tamori and a forest canopy that was barely visible at the bottom. Her amber obi was embellished with purple and red fern vines. Her obiage was plum in color, and it was encircled by golden yellow obijime. She wore black zori with white tabi. She was of average height, with bangs that almost reached her shoulders framing her face and smooth black hair that fell to just above her shoulders, covering her ears. Ruby red eyeliner complemented her onyx black eyes, while a hint of blush on her cheeks complemented her fair skin. Because she had trained as a medic nin under her kimono, she had an athletic frame. Although her bust resembled what Kushina's was displaying, it was not as defined by her kimono as that of her sensei, Tsunade. Nagato Uzumaki was on Shizune's left. Nagato Uzumaki is a pale-skinned man who is taller than average but not as tall as Jiraiya. He has a lean, athletic build that was developed during the Third Shinobi War, and his long, blood-red hair falls to his chin, exposing his left violet eye. Nagato was dressed in a midnight blue hakama and hakama himo, a white nagajuban, and an electric indigo kimono underneath a sapphire blue haori. Additionally, he was dressed in a white tabi with white straps and royal blue zori. The red Uzumaki spiral was highlighted with a black outline on the back of his haori, making it easy to follow the swirl. His own mask was fastened to his hakama himo. Nagato's mask is shaped like a skull that has been carved to resemble a mask. It had 3 carved lines that let its bearer breathe, and its jaw was hardly perceptible. Its eyes were somewhat bigger than the wearer's and had a shape resembling Ichigo's mask. There were no other markings on the smooth white mask. He had his own kodachi tucked into his hakama himo. A simple silver rectangle with black suka ito over a white samigawa as his suba. The Kushira has an ocean blue sheath and is silver like the Tsuba. Konan Senju Uzumaki, her husband Yahiko Uzumaki, and their daughter Rangaku Senju Uzumaki stood opposite Nagato and Shizune. Yahiko Uzumaki is an average-height man with light brown eyes, bright orange spiky hair that was shorter than Minato's, and lightly tanned skin that revealed a very lean build. A moss-green hakama and hakama himo with a fawn-brown haori complemented his mantis-green kimono and white nagajiban. The red Uzumaki spiral was highlighted with a black outline on the back of his haori, making it easy to follow the swirl. He was wearing forest green zori and white tori. The Uzumaki mask he wore looked like a helmet. Although it would cover his entire head, it had a faceplate that curved from the outside of the eye to cover the cheeks and jawline, and a point that came down to cover half of his nose. The faceplate's exterior is lined with drawings of human teeth. He had a nearly 4-foot-long odachi in his hakama himo, with a shortened handle that resembled a katana. Compared to other more common shapes, his tsuba was more of an ovalish guard. The Kushira matched the gunmetal gray color. The black sheath covered a white samigawa with a bone-brown tsukaito. Konan, his wife, had short, pale blue hair, a bun on the right side, a light blue paper origami flower clipped in the middle, matching eye shadow, and deep blue nail polish on her fingers and toes. She also had firm amber eyes. 4 additional piercings, arranged like compass points, encircled the navel piercing beneath her kimono. Like her mother, she has a big bust. Even though it was less obvious, it was still very apparent. A white nagajuban with an airy shin in the collar was on her. Her kimono, which was midnight blue, had a winding pattern of gold-looking trail that twisted around it like the tail of a comet. The back of the outfit featured an Uzumaki spiral with the Senju symbol on both shoulders, and the kimono was covered in intricately detailed large cranes that followed the star-like trail with sporadic placements of star flowers. She wore a red obijime wrapped around a cream-white obi with a gold-looking obiage. She was wearing a pair of white zori with midnight blue straps and a white tabi. Rangaku Senju Uzumaki, their daughter, was holding Konan's hand and her husband's. 3-year-old Rangaku Senju Uzumaki wore a beautifully decorated kimono. She shared her father's vivid orange hair, which reached her upper back. She also wore a hair clip with 2 purple flowers on it, and a section of her hair above her forehead was reminiscent of Tsunade. She is a shade lighter than Yahiko in terms of tanned skin. She wore red nail polish on her fingers and had grandmother-like hazel eyes. She wore a white nagajuban with an airy shin, just like her mother and aunt, but her kimono was decorated to resemble a flower garden. The kimono was initially black until it reached her mid-torso, at which point it abruptly changed to a royal purple. A wide variety of flowers, including roses, sunflowers, lilies, and devil's bite, were arranged throughout the kimono, mostly at the ends of the sleeves, covering the stomach, ankles, and shoulders. Even though the kimono's underside was a fandango purple with a matching obijime, the design featured flowers that continued over the obi. To contrast with the design of her kimono, she wore royal purple obiage. Her zori were black with yellow straps, but her tabi were white. Additionally, she wore the Senju symbol on her left shoulder and the Uzumaki spiral on her back. The group displayed a variety of smiles as the 5 got closer to Ginrei, ranging from Rangaku's exceptionally radiant smile to Tsunade's modest but happy smile. Both groups bow respectfully as they reach the gate. "Welcome Senju-sama, I welcome you and your party to the Kuchiki compound to celebrate young Naruto's birthday." "Thank you for your welcome Kuchiki-sama, I would not miss my grandnephew's party. Uzumaki family is the most precious thing one can have. I have kept true to this so I won't miss this for anything." Ginrei's lips quiver as he moves slightly to allow another member of the Kuchiki clan to approach the Senju Uzumaki section and led them around the compound. "I am glad to hear that Senju-sama, I hope you have a wonderful time here at the party." However, 2 people are tasked with keeping an eye on the party due to its size. Ginrei saw the Hokage and his family just a few steps behind the Senju Uzumaki family as they passed through the gates. Minato Namikaze, formerly known as Mitarashi, his wife Anko Namikaze, and their son Itazuru Namikaze are the Yondaime Hokage. Tall, lean, and fair-skinned, Minato Namikaze was regarded as one of Konoha's most attractive men, second only to Byakuya Kuchiki. 2 spiky chin-length side bangs frame his face on either side of his spiky blonde hair. He wore a black hakama and a black kimono with a white nagajuban underneath. A silver thread, which extends from his wrist to the middle of his forearm and then loops back around to the opposite side of his wrists, connected a series of white diamonds along the sleeves. The hakama also had the same diamond design, but the lower set extended from his ankle to his knees. However, these diamonds did not completely circle the hakama. He wore a sleeveless, waist-length, floral white haori. To finish off his look, he wore black zori and white tabi. The woman he married, Anko Namikaze, was a couple of inches shorter than her husband. She resembled Konan Senju Uzumaki in that she was a well-endowed, slender woman with fair skin. Her matte violet hair and light brown eyes are styled in a short, spiky, fanned-up ponytail that points upward. Her spiky bangs cover her forehead, and the remainder of her hair reaches below her cheeks and covers her ears. In contrast to many of her predecessors, and in keeping with her boisterous personality, Anko wore a black nagajuban underneath her orchid-purple kimono. Two long pythons, one with its head on her right shoulder and the other by her left ankle, ran the length of the kimono in opposite directions. She wore a slightly duller gold obiage and a black obi with gold obijime. She usually wouldn't, but on this particular occasion, her fingers were painted a royal purple. She wore a lavender zori with amethyst straps and a black tabi. Itazuru, their son, shared his mother's fair complexion but had his father's bright, spiky blonde hair and cerulean blue eyes. However, his mother's purple hair spikes gave his hair a sunset-like appearance. His bright orange kimono faded to a burnt earth, and he was wearing a white nagajuban. He was wearing a red folded black hakama, white tabi, and rojo red zori with orange-strapped tangerine pads. Between his parents, Itazuru was a little ahead of them, walking exaggeratedly with stiff leg steps that rose almost as high as parallel to the ground and long arm swings. He and Anko were grinning broadly, their faces splitting. Anko waved wildly at Ginrei as they approached, her arm extended well above her head, while Minato waved at shoulder height. Itazuru appeared to smile more broadly at his parents' interactions, but she stopped waving to the head of the Kuchiki clan and snarled as she elbowed her husband in the ribs while seemingly chewing him out. This may have been because of his apparent lack of enthusiasm. As the other guards bowed alongside Ginrei, he said, "Greetings Hokage-sama. I welcome you to the Kuchiki compound on this day of celebration for my grandson," Ginrei said. "I am happy we can make it. If I am not mistaken, your grandson is a few months younger than my son if I am correct." Indeed, young Naruto is nearly the same age as young Itazuru here. Anko looked at Minato questioningly and said, "Well, I am hoping that they can become friends like how I and Byakuya were. Didn't Byakuya originally not hang out with you as you were too soft-spoken in the academy?" she inquired. Feeling ashamed of his interactions with Byakuya in the academy, Minato rubbed the back of his head and laughed. Anko put her hands on her hips, puffed out her chest, and stuck her nose up as if her statement were certain. "If anything, Itazuru and Naruto will be more like me and Kushina were," she exclaimed with assurance. Since the two had been the most mischievous students in the academy and had even caused chaos when they were genin, Minato said anxiously, "I hope they don't cause as much trouble as you two did when it comes to pranks." If that were true, he could see the documents now. With a barely perceptible smile beneath his massive mustache, he said, "Well Hokage-sama, I can assure you of the fact that my grandson has a mix of both of their personalities." With wide-eyed concern, Minato said to the man, "I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing." Ginrei motioned for 3 guards to advance for the Hokage and his family, saying, "Well, that is something that you will have to see." Ginrei bowed once more before Minato departed, and the family bowed back before heading inside to join in the celebrations. The leader of the Uchiha clan and his family immediately followed the Hokage. Fugaku Uchiha, the leader of the clan, had brought his wife, Makoto Uchiha, along with their 2 kids, Sasuke and Itachi Uchiha. Makoto was on his left, and Fugaku was on the group's extreme right. Their youngest son, Sasuke, was positioned between Makoto and Itachi, while their oldest son, Itachi, was on the far left. In contrast to the typical fair skin of the Uchiha, Fugaku was an average-height man with shoulder-length brown hair and slightly tanned skin. In addition, he has onyx-colored eyes with noticeable creases at the corners of his mouth and prominent tear troughs. Under a black kimono that changed to royal blue as it passed his obi to his hakama, he wore a white nagajuban. Small, wavy lines with barely perceptible crests and troughs moved across his hakama. His royal blue haori was held closed by a white haori himo, and he wore a fire brick red obi that matched the Uchiha fan's red. He had a much larger Uchiha fan on its back and 2 smaller ones at the level of his collarbones. He wore a white tabi with fire brick red straps and maple brown zori. Makoto Uchiha, his wife, was a stunning woman with fair skin and raven black hair that fell to her mid-back like a waterfall. Her face was framed by a set of side bangs that reached her chin. Like all Uchiha clan members, she had onyx black eyes. She had on a white eri shin and a white nagajuban. In addition, she wore a black kimono that, like her husband's, changed to royal blue as it hung past her obi. Her kimono was decorated with tiny, brilliant blue stars, and below the knee, fireworks were exploding. She wore a bright white obijime underneath her fire brick red obi, and her obiage was wrapped in an equally white obiage. She also wore white tabi with red straps made of fire brick and maple wood zori. She wore a royal blue, sleeveless haori with Uchiha clan crests in the same spot as her husband over her kimono. Itachi, their oldest son, is 8 years old. He is fairly complete and looks a lot like his father, Fugaku. Like every member of the Uchiha clan, he has onyx black eyes with noticeable tear troughs. His black hair is currently growing out, resulting in a short ponytail that falls to the middle of his shoulders and is tied off near the top of his neck. The tufts that fell over his forehead were parted, and 2 sets of side bangs that fell to his chin framed his face. He was dressed in a white nagajuban over a hunter green kimono. Aquamarine lines that ran along the seams of his kimono added accents. He wore an aquamarine obi that matched. He wore bronze brown zori with burgundy straps and white tabi, and his hakama were a Castleton green. He wore a midnight blue haori over his kimono, with a pale azure stripe encircling the collar. There was a big Uchiha fan crest on the back of his haori. As they strolled, his younger brother Sasuke held his hand. Like his mother, the young Sasuke has fair skin. With 2 side bangs that hung just below his earlobes, his black hair protruded from the back of his head in the shape of a spiky mane. He was dressed in a white nagajuban over a slate blue kimono and matching hakama. Wearing white tabi and matching zori to his older brother Itachi, he wore a sea salt white obi around his waist. As he looked directly into Ginrei's eyes, Fugaku maintained his customary stern expression. "Hello Kuchiki-san, I offer you and the Kuchiki clan congratulations on the day of young Naruto's birthday. Greetings Uchiha-san, thank you for the happy sentiments for my grandson. I am happy to see you and your family are doing well. Yes, young Itachi is going to be graduating the academy soon, a full 4 years ahead of his peers," said Fugaku with pride. Ginrei looked subtly at the young boy without turning away from Fugaku, raising an eyebrow at this. While that is impressive, does that not seem a bit young for the boy to graduate? Well, my son has shown great skill and tactics for his age, and I agree with his teachers that he is ready to be a shinobi. Though it is better than a mere 4 months. What could one assess from such a short time on an individual's ability to combat more experienced fighters? Asked Fugaku. Ginrei gestured for a guard to approach and said, "Well, let me not keep you here. I am sure that you and Makoto-san are eager to see Byakuya and Kushina as well as meet young Naruto." In order to lead the Uchiha to the dining hall where the celebration was taking place, the man set up shop at the door and waited for them to join him. The big wooden doors of the gate opened as the Uchiha clan family got closer, revealing another gate they had to go through. In order to better monitor the family, the guard trailed Fugaku by a few steps as they passed the gate. The family was able to view the Kuchiki compound after the first gate closed and the second one opened. While Sasuke was amazed to see a new location, Itachi marveled at the traditional architecture of the buildings inside the clan's walls. The Uchiha clan compound was designed to resemble a city inside Konoha rather than the highly connected apartment-like area that many clans used during the Warring Clan era, despite having traditional building designs. To the best of his knowledge, only the Hyuga, Uchiha, and Senju clans kept up this kind of compound. However, unlike the Hyuga and Kuchiki, the Uchiha clan kept it more in the clan head's house than throughout the entire compound. The guard escorting them was dressed in a black hakama with a white hakama himo, a white shitagi with a black kosode with his clan symbol on the back, and standard black shinobi sandals concealed beneath the hakama. His hakama himo contained an ordinary-looking katana, but Itachi was aware that the Uzumaki and Kuchiki frequently used it as a trap because all of their swords had special powers that set them apart from the norm. For the young Uchiha, the atmosphere of the compound itself was particularly striking. Even though it still had a sense of pride, like many clans, it also seemed to be homey, which was strange for a clan to feel. If he were to question his mother about it, she would explain that the feeling was brought on by Kushina and the other Uzumaki who reside in the compound. Otherwise, it would feel more like the pride and self-importance of the Hyuga and Uchiha. Before Itachi realized it, they had stopped moving and reached a door with a paper screen that opened into a sizable structure. Itachi could hear lots of adult conversation and laughter coming from the door. Their guard opened the door, bowed slightly to the group, and said, "Welcome to Naruto-sama's party, may your time be joyful and entertaining." After saying those words, the Uchiha took off their Zori and put it with the other guests' Zori before the family entered. Itachi saw gifts from the guests on a small table as soon as he entered. Gifts for such an occasion are sent in advance for safety and to make sure that families are less likely to be targeted for carrying valuable items, according to what his mother had told him. In terms of politics, it also prevents disputes and gift sabotage during the celebration and depends on the staff to avoid creating problems in the background. Itachi glanced around and noticed that there were numerous guards stationed throughout the room, including the one who had escorted them, as well as 2 standing in each corner wearing the same robes as the one who had escorted them. Numerous children from various clans, including the Senju, Hyuga, Namikaze, and Inzuka, were gathered in the center. The parents of the kids were gathered at a seating area with short tables and lots of sitting pillows, a little distance away from the kids. They were chatting away and occasionally checking on their kids to make sure they were all right. Kushina Uzumaki Kuchiki, the matriarch of the Kuchiki clan, was among the first individuals he encountered. Over a white nagajuban that covered an airy shin, she wore a red kimono that matched her hair and was embellished with large pink sakura flowers encircled by smaller orange sakura flowers. She wore an obijime that was worn into a flower with 6 points and a sunny yellow obi with a red obi edge. Her long hair, which usually flowed freely, was secured in a high ponytail with a carnation pink scrunchie. Additionally, this produced 2 long bangs that hung down the front of her kimono past her shoulders. Wearing the standard white tabi with cerise pink zori and orchid laces at the entrance, her typical black hairclip was now a sunset red. But what caught him off guard was the matriarch's own sword in the red hakama himo. "Ka-san, why is Kushina-sama wearing a sword during the party?" Itachi asked, perplexed, pulling on his mother's sleeve. Makoto smiled slightly and started to respond. "Well, you see, Itachi. The Uzumaki and Kuchiki clan are great swordsmen, often forging their own blades. So much like how Hokage-sama never goes anywhere without at least one of his special kunai, so to do none of the clan's members go anywhere without their swords. In fact, if you see Byakuya-sama, you will see he too is carrying his sword despite the event." Itachi turned to see Byakuya with his own sword in his hakama himo. "I think I understand, mother. Every clan keeps their tools on them even when attending formal events as a means of never being defenseless in case something goes wrong." This time, Fugaku grinned at his 8-year-old son's intelligence, albeit in a much more subdued way. Makoto encouraged Itachi to take Sasuke to where the kids were playing as they approached the areas where the partygoers were congregating, while she and Fugaku went to meet with the other parents. They saw what the Kuchiki and Uzumaki families were wearing as they got closer. Byakuya was dressed in an airy shin-collared vista blue nagajuban. He wore a white kimono, baby blue hakama, and a white hakama himo with a sword. In contrast to his white tabi, his haori himo was camel brown, and his zori at the entrance were matte azure with blue-gray laces. His haori was divided in half, with the top half being a pale light sky blue and the bottom half and cuffs being Marian blue. While the elder of the 2 women was sipping sake, they also observed Mariko Uzumaki conversing with Tsunade. Due to her husband's death during the Kyuubi's rampage, Mariko was left a widow. Despite having hair that reached her chin and a set pushed behind her right ear, she shared her cousin Kushina's fair skin. It was the same vivid red as Naruto and Kushina's, and it seemed to be parted to frame both sides of her face. Although she had a slightly smaller bust, she is also known to be marginally taller than Kushina. She also has violet-tinged gray eyes. Over a white nagajuban, she wore a bright orange kimono featuring a scene of a black tree with nearly yellow leaves in bloom. She wore a pumpkin orange obiage tied around a rich black obi with a candy apple red wijime underneath. Her white tabi, like everyone else's, would be enhanced by a pair of licorice black zori and straps. Her kodachi was held in a white hakama himo over her obi. Her kodachi was kept in a white scabbard with an oval gold tsuba with a picture of Ryujin encircling the inside. Her kashira was gold like the tsuba, and the handle of her kodachi had an emerald suka ito over a white samigawa. In addition, she wore a Kushina-style mask on her hakama himo. She wore a mostly white mask with 4 shot horns on the forehead, accentuated by black circles with a line of the same color falling between them. The lines differ in length. The 2 inner lines barely reach the center of the forehead, while the outer horns fall near the edge of the eye. A series of red lines cross the inner part of the eye, then went into the next one, which rose, curved back toward the middle of the forehead, and bent to meet the pupil. Its eyes were so small that it was difficult to determine whether they were expressive. A set of red blades descended from the cheekbones as they curved outward to match the lower jaw's height. 2 more sets of blades emerged from the lower jaw, one set of which followed the same angle as the set that emerged from the cheekbones, and the final set returned straight from the lower jaw. Alongside Shizune, she was one of the main employees at the hospital. She may carry a blade like any other Uzumaki, but since shinobi injuries are not the only way to be hurt, she mainly concentrates on using her skills as a medic to keep her family alive during times of conflict and peace. "Hello everyone," Makoto called out. "Hello Makoto," was greeted by a joyful Kushina as everyone turned to face her. She immediately got up to embrace her friend. She spoke rapidly and enthusiastically. "How are you? How is little Itachi? How is Sasuke?" Makoto answered questions from her easily agitated friend with a little giggle. "I am fine Kushina-chan. Me, Fugaku, Itachi and little Sasuke are doing wonderfully. In fact, little Itachi is set to graduate from the academy." Kushina exhaled deeply. "Wow, that's great. He was only in for 2 years and already graduating. Though don't you think that is a little fast?" Makoto let out a deep breath. "I think it is, though Fugaku seems to think it is fine. But the one thing we did agree on was that he was not ready to graduate just after 4 months." Kushina looked at him with a frown. "Please don't tell me that a teacher actually believed that to be a good idea." They both caught a chuckle behind them. "I'd believe it, Kushina. Thanks to the Warhawk Danzo, any talent in the academy is rushed through no matter how bad of idea it is to throw developing minds into the harsh world we live in. He was part of the reason that Kakashi was able to graduate so early despite being 6, stated Sume Inuzuka. The other 2 mothers decided it was best to move on to other subjects after she said, "Well, I'm glad that sensible parents are making good decisions for their kids. No need to rush them into this life. And if that one-eyed crippled bastard makes any attempt on my Naruto-chan, well, he'll see why Kumo named me the Red Death firsthand." "Speaking of the little runt, why don't you tell Makoto what you had Naruto doing?" shoved Sume. Instantly Kushina's disposition changed. "Oh Makoto-chan, it was so adorable. Little Naru started his calligraphy and made all sorts of adorable faces while he was concentrating. It was just so cute. And he even managed to get his first few kanji down before his 3rd birthday." She exclaimed. She puffed out her chest and boasted, "And soon he'll be writing his first basic seal, then he'll be a seal master like his Ka-chan." The antics of their matriarchs around her family caused the other Kuchiki mothers to smirk or roll their eyes or giggle a little. The mother and her husband's love for their son was well known throughout the compound. Despite her apparent overindulgence in the boy, he never displayed the demeanor of a pampered brat. Rather, he was the sweetest child who admired his parents and displayed many of their peculiarities. Ino's mother, Noriko Yamanaka, said, "Kushina, don't you think you were rushing him a bit?" "Not at all," Tsunade interrupted. "When I was younger, my grandmother Mito got me working on my calligraphy at about the same age as little Naru is, as I'm sure Karen and Rangaku are as well," she asked, glancing at her daughter and Mariko, who both nodded. "It is important for an Uzumaki to be well versed in drawing and using seals as it is part of our culture," said Mariko. She was almost as powerful a seal mistress as Jiraiya the Gamasanin, though not as powerful as Kushina and Mito. "Well, I don't know about Naruto, but Rangaku doesn't seem to enjoy her calligraphy studies. She has been pestering Yahiko about getting a sword so she can show her skill, as she likes to put it," Konan murmurs. Tsunade objected. "She's too young to get a sword." "Calm down, mother. I have told her this, but her father seems to cave to the look she tries to use on you and me." Yahiko magically entered their conversation and protested, "Hey, it's not my fault she is so adorable. It doesn't help when she uses those darn puppy dog eyes on me," he pouted. Tsunade and Konan gave him icy looks at that point, saying, "She is too young to be messing with swords." The 2 women said, "And there will be hell to pay, mister, if she goes anywhere near your mask." In a panic, Yahiko nodded his head to please the 2 frightful women. The fathers were a short distance from the mothers and Yahiko, who was being reprimanded. However, Fugaku appeared to be the more outspoken of the 2. "Itachi is set to graduate from the academy soon. Just 2 years and he has proven himself to be a prodigy in the shinobi arts," boasted Fugaku. "Do you think that rushing him through the academy to becoming a shinobi is a good for such a young child?" asked Minato. "I have full faith in Itachi. His skills and mindset are reflective of a true shinobi. He may have the mindset, but does he have the maturity that comes with age that the academy and a family give to prepare our children for the harsh life beyond the walls? Replied Byakuya. Fugaku scowled in response. Of course he has the maturity. I have trained him personally and he has seen war, so he knows the harshness of the shinobi life. So, you have taken your now 8-year-old son to see what shinobi conflict looks like. The Shodai and your previous clan head had a dream that young children would not see such conflict. Seems rather counterproductive to your clan's history with this village, no? Hazashi interrupted Fugaku before he could reply, saying, "Pardon my interruption, Kuchiki-sama, may I ask how your clan has been able to prepare for such an event as this? There seem to be many guards for such a gathering. The Kuchiki clan prides itself on the following of tradition and keeping to our duty of compiling and preserving the history of the continent. As such we follow many traditions that were seen in the time before the Rakudo Sennin, such as guards being present for guests during formal occasions," responded Byakuya. "To answer your question, Hiruzen-san, we divided duties properly among the clan members, with Kushina directing what she could or taking on the responsibilities herself as she wanted to throw Naruto-chan a grand party. While the adults were talking, Naruto, the honored guest, was playing with the many children who had come to his party under the watchful eye of the other Uzumaki who shared the compound with Kushina and Rukia. Ichigo Uzumaki, wearing his own crimson-red formal kimono with fire-brick red hakama, stood close to the children with his arms folded. A cherry blossom pink haori himo held a Persian red haori adorned with wind-blown ivory flowers over his kimono. While keeping an eye on his nephew, who was a little exploratory, he was still wearing his sword and blood-red sash. Ichigo muttered, "I can't believe we got stuck watching these other kids, so that only Rukia and Reiji Uzumaki could hear him." With his long crimson hair tied up in a widow's peak ponytail and seal tattoos on either side, Renji was a tall man who was marginally taller than Ichigo. Even his back, a large portion of his chest, and his limbs were covered. A tall, white headband that covered a large portion of his forehead served as his forehead protector. Even though he usually wore the Kuchiki Shihakusho with the typical ankle-high shinobi sandals, he was wearing a burgundy-red nagajuban today underneath a black kimono with thick brown tamori and thin, tall azure blue boxes that fell vertically across the kimono with 6 lines in each box. He was still wearing his white hakama himo, which contained his mask and sword, and he wore a mint green obi. A deep black sheath held his sword. It features a bronze tsuba that is rectangular in shape and has 2 lightning bolts running through it. Alongside a bronze kashira, his sword features a Fulu red Sukaido and a maize yellow Samigawa. His hakama himo was adorned with a mask that appeared to be a smiling wolf. It had 2 nearly foot-long ears, prominent cheekbones, a thick black line that emphasized its nostrils, and an upper chop full of teeth that resembled human teeth. Additionally, it has a set of red lines that arched around its forehead and then converged to become parallel as it reached the area between its eyebrows. Additionally, the black lines that draw attention to its eye holes were accentuated by a set of red lines. Rukia had also changed into a kimono. She wore an ivory-white nagajuban for the party underneath a cardinal red kimono with a sky magenta pink horizontal stripe over an icterine yellow that ran along the sleeves and the bottom of the kimono. Along the sleeves and the length of the kimono, there were also a lot of sakura flowers. The coral orange obi she wore had 2 thin black stripes running the length of it. Her tori and straps were snow white, and she had a candy apple red obiage around the obi and a bright white obijime underneath that matched the color of her tabi. "I don't mind watching over Naruto, Rangaku and Karen, but why do we have to watch over the other brats? Shouldn't that be the parents' job?" Renji said. Well, Orihime doesn't seem to mind, as they observed Orihime doting all over the adorable kids while they were playing. Orihime Uzumaki was a young adolescent who was Ichigo's age. She had bright orange hair that usually fell to her waist, but today it was tied up in a loose bun and held in place by a tiny bouquet of flowers with 4 ties hanging from the hairpin. Her side locks fell past her shoulder, and she wore her hair parted to the right like her Aunt Kushina. The collar of the first layer of her kimono concealed her 2 snowflake hair clips. Her slender and curvaceous figure, along with her large brown eyes and soft features, made her the envy of many women. She also had a bust that rivaled that of her grandmother Tsunade, which led many women to believe that the size of the bust, along with their red and orange hair, was a clan trait. When she was in the village and the compound, she usually wore the Kuchiki Shihakusho. She does, however, wear a distinctive ensemble when she leaves the village. It consists of a bright white midriff top with an opening that reveals nearly as much of her impressive bust as Tsunade's kimono top, leaving a noticeable opening around the armpits that resembles a sports bra, and a turned-down arrow blue collar with an arrow blue star button to keep it closed. Additionally, it featured 2 puffed shoulders with 2 smooth spikes that curved outward and were just tall enough to reach her chin, 2 detached sleeves that were long enough to reach just below her elbows, and 2 turned-up cuffs that were the same shade of blue as her collar. Its bottom is made up of an ankle-length bright white dress with black embroidery that followed the top of the dress. The dress had a tight pencil skirt just above the knees, but as it fell farther, it took on a loose, flowing shape. She wore ankle-high, short-heeled boots with pixie wing flare-ups on the side that matched the color of her entire ensemble. The kimono she was wearing featured a white nagajuban underneath a 2-layer kimono with an amethyst first layer. The rose-pink kimono faded to a snow white that fell diagonally from each sleeve to the bottom before transitioning to an amethyst. The non-pink sections were decked out as a veritable flower garden. She is wearing a bright red obiage around a chartreuse green obi with a Byzantine blue obijime. She was wearing straps and a brilliant rose zori to go with her snow white tabi. She is wearing a blood red hakama himo with her own mask and sword tucked inside. Her mask was strikingly similar to Ichigo's. Thick, Byzantine blue lines made up the line pattern, which extended from the temples to a point where they merged directly between the eyes. From the bottom of the outside of the eyes to the edge of where the lips would be, a series of lines framed the mask. Another set began to curve down to the teeth and was located beneath the eyes. She carried a standard katana in a sky blue sheath over a bright white samigawa with a matching tsukaito. Her sword has a silver kashira and a round silver tsuba with an 8-pointed snowflake pattern inside. While Tear was talking to Naruto and Karen, Orihime was brushing the hair of some of the girls, such as Rangaku and Hinata, and talking to Ino and Yakumo, who were attempting to reassure the young Sakura, who was anxious about interacting with the other kids. The Uzumaki and Kuchiki clan symbols were displayed on the back of Naruto's simple aqua kimono and haori, which were worn beneath a white nagajuban. He is wearing a white haori himo and zori with a blue-green hakama and matching obi. Karen was a young girl, about Naruto's age, with fair skin and bright red hair and eyes. Her hair, which she usually wears down to the base of her neck, was unusual because the right side was semi-spiky and the left was straight. Today, though, she wore it tied up in a bun that was secured with 2 hair needles. To help her see, she wears narrow, brown glasses. A dark green kimono with an ivy pattern and flowers crawling up from the bottom was what she was wearing. She was wearing an aquamarine obiage wrapped around a white obijime in a cream-colored obi. For this kimono, she wore white tabi with forest green zori. Although Itazuru appeared to be the one dragging the youngest Uchiha and the Aburame heir around to socialize with some of the other boys, Sasuke and Shino appeared to get along well with Itazuru. Since one of them was too lazy to engage with the others and the other appeared to be hesitant to speak to anyone else, Shikamaru and Choji were left alone. The 3 on the side thought, wait until Orihime sees them like that, she'll drag them over in a heartbeat. A shadow clone of Orihime had materialized in front of the 2 boys as if at the exact moment. What are you 2 doing over here by yourselves? It's not fun to be off in the corner while everyone else is having fun. She asked the boys in a very upbeat tone. Shikamaru opened his eyes tiredly and then yawned, while Choji looked down with a sad shyness. I'm shy. I don't know if they will judge me like the other kids at the park did, was the shy Choji's response. Orihime scowled, indicating that she didn't comprehend what he had said. Why do you think that they will be like the kids in the park? Replied Orihime. Choji was unable to respond to her query. In any case, it was more of an instinct he had. She swiftly seized both boys and pulled them to the group that included Itazuru, Sasuke, Neji, and Kiba. Naruto, Tear, and Karen noticed that his cousin was dragging 2 boys to the group that surrounded the Yondaime's son, so they moved to where they were congregating. This encouraged the group surrounding the actual Orihime to visit the gathering kids as well, escorted by the older woman. Orihime dispelled her clone when they all gathered, but he still smiled encouragingly at Choji to introduce himself. Choji raised his hand a little and looked down at his feet before introducing himself. Hello, my name is Choji Akamaiki. The other children gave him a warm reception, though each child's volume and level of enthusiasm differed. As a result, the kids temporarily formed a large group. Naruto, the man of the moment, was the first to reply. He had met most of them one-on-one as they came into the room, but he still decided to adhere to the protocol that his mother and father had briefly explained to him prior to the celebration. Naruto, the grandson of the Kuchiki clan head, bowed slightly and said, Greetings Akamaiki-san, I am Naruto Kuchiki Uzumaki. Many others then followed suit. I am Tear Haribel Shihoin, she said, making a small bow of her own. The Yondaime's son was undoubtedly the most raucous. He pumped his fist into the air and exclaimed, "Yo! I'm Itazuru Namikaze. It's great to meet you." The Hyuga heiress, Hinata, and Sakura Haruno had the quietest. Both hid behind Neji and Ino, respectively, and spoke softly. Orihime returned to the other chaperones as the kids started interacting. Itachi had joined Hana and Izuka there, making it their gathering spot for the celebration. "Are you guys having fun?" Ichigo and Renji shrugged, while Itachi nodded and smiled slightly, displaying a joyful smile that could light up any night. "I don't mind watching Naruto, Karen, or Rangaku since they are family, but why do we have to watch the other kids?" replied Ichigo. Rukia appeared prepared to kick him in the shin, and Orihime gave him a cute pout. "Uzumaki-san, why do you not want to watch the other children?" Itachi inquired out of curiosity, and Hana snarled at the suggestion that the elder Uzumaki disliked her ototo. "I have no issue per se, but the parents should also be chaperoning their children, or at least person they can trust, instead of just relying on others to look after their kids," he said, sighing. Itachi could relate to Ichigo's emotions about the situation. He was uncomfortable leaving his ototo in the hands of strangers because he had taken care of his brother since birth when his parents moved out. Hana is experiencing similar emotions. It was hard to trust an outsider with the pack's safety unless they joined because of their pack mentality. The kids started to form their own social circles within the group. The chaperons were a little taken aback to see who hung out with whom. Before Orihime brought them all together, they were nearly identical. But this time, the girls split up between the groups of Itazurus and Naruto. Hinata went to Itazurus group, which consisted of Kiba, Neji, Sasuke, Shino, and Yakumo, while Rangaku went to Naruto with Choji, Shikamaru, Ino, and Sakura. Rukia, Renji, and Hana laughed a little at Tear's responses to the other girls. While Rangaku and Karen attempted to position themselves directly next to Naruto, she appeared to approach the youthful Uzumaki Kuchiki. Unaware of what the three were laughing at, Orihime gazed at them in confusion. With a sweet and perplexed tone, she questioned, "What's so funny?" Orihime glanced over to see what was making them laugh as Rukia gestured toward Naruto's group and Hana clarified, "It seems your little cousin has a bit of luck with the ladies." She didn't realize it until she witnessed Tear's efforts to prevent Karen and Rangaku from being assigned to Naruto's seat. She gave a sweet little giggle. "I think it's cute how well he gets along with little Tear, Karen and Rangaku," Orihime said. They all gave her a sardonic glance. Rukia said, Orihime, I don't think they just get along well. It seems like she has developed a little crush on Naruto, it's adorable," was what Hana told her, and Orihime first looked surprised before she became awestruck and gushed over Tear's adorable little crush on Naruto. However, one of Hana's remarks stuck in their memories. Ichigo asked, "What did you mean by little luck?" Hana grinned mischievously. Karen and Rangaku, who are also attempting to get close to Naruto, are the targets of her claim. She is attempting to demonstrate that she is the leading woman pursuing Naruto, Hana chuckled. Before the mothers joined them, the others exchanged a look of realization, followed by their own looks of cunning. "I heard the awe of someone having a crush. What did I miss?" Hana was the first to respond when Noriko asked, "It looks like Tear, Karen, and Rangaku will be competing for Naruto's attention soon." The mothers observed Tear trying to establish her claim against Karen and Rangaku as they observed Naruto's group. When the mothers of the three contestants started to express their opinions, Yorichi grinned as broadly as she could, pleased that her daughter was taking the initiative to do what she wanted to do. "Well, I think Tear is going to win his heart," Yorichi said smugly. "No way, my money's on Karen," Kushina said in a more animated tone, while Mariko said it in a more subdued one. "I'll get in on this," Tsunade said with a smirk. "I bet Rangaku will get his attention when all is said and done," and Konan shook her head in her hand. "Mother, if you bet on Rangaku she is more likely to lose," said a monotone Konan, which made Tsunade scratch her cheek. "For this, I shall help her," she said, shocking everyone. Tsunade was the first to come out of her shock, and she swiftly wrapped her arm around Konan's neck, giving the other mothers the peace sign. Tsunade cheered. Fugaku, Byakuya, Hiyashi, and Hizashi all gave blank looks or single raised eyebrows at the conversation they were hearing, while others, like Yahiko, gave dramatic looks or, in Shikaku's case, an uninterested look. The fathers were drawn to Kushina's outcry, but they could only hear what Tsunade had to say because she seemed to be as enthusiastic as Yorichi and Kushina. Meanwhile, Kazuki was trying to conceal his snickering behind a small paper fan he pulled from somewhere. "My little girl is too young to be interested in boys," Yahiko said, his expression quickly changing to one of exaggerated rage. "For at least 20 years, that little brat had better stay away from all boys. I think it's funny to see such a sight, especially this young," Kazuki laughed in response to his declaration. Hazashi then turned to face the Shihoin patriarch and asked, "Are you sure you should be encouraging such behavior?" He said, "Your daughter seems to be interested in the young Kuchiki as well." Kazuki had not yet moved his fan, but his tone went against what he was saying. "Well, she has her mother's spirit, so she will find her path outside the homestead, he. His laughter sounded like a crazy man about to carry out a sinister deed. We shall see how they turn out before I make a call of my approval," Byakuya said, surveying the girls who had shown interest in his son. A few minutes later, Ginrei joined the gathering, which prompted Naruto to leap to his feet and run over to greet his grandfather. "Hey Ojiazan, can you meet my new friends?" Naruto bowed respectfully and hugged his grandfather after the bow was returned. Out of the corner of his eye, Ginrei saw both Kushina and his son exuding energy that could be interpreted as threatening if he did not allow his grandson to act his age, not wanting to hear his daughter-in-law's tirade and confront the reason she was named the Red Death in the Third Shinobi War. Ginrei asked an excited Naruto, looking down at his grandson who seemed to be trying to contain himself, though that etiquette broke as he did not answer to his 3-year-old. Byakuya is aware that his father's inability to relinquish the professionalism he always wears is a result of his love for his grandson, but Kushina never thought that was a good excuse, and Byakuya agrees with him at least when the man was with family in private. Naruto brings his grandfather to meet the other children he was playing with, and introduces him to many of the other Kuchiki clan children. Kushina discreetly signals one of the guards to bring in the gifts, which are placed on a palanquin so that Naruto sits in front of his parents while he opens them. Although his favorites appeared to be a stuffed fox that Orihime had made for him and a forest green scarf that Kushina had made for him with white horizontal stripes placed around it, Naruto was very excited about every gift he received and expressed his gratitude to each family for what they had given him. After the gifts had all been opened, the cake that Kushina had made for the celebration was brought in. Kushina's cake, a tall 3-layered rectangular cake with 2 vanilla layers and 1 chocolate between the 2 that made up each stack, was a magnificent sight to behold, especially since Kushina knew Akamaki would be arriving. The tallest layer had the icing of a sweet strawberry with Kuchiki and Uzumaki symbols next to each other. The other adults were not doing much better, though Byakuya had a smugness about him that the other parents immediately noticed, and Kushina herself had the most face-splitting grin she could muster. The 3 Akamaki were practically drooling at the behemoth before them, especially the older 2, who had tasted Kushina's cooking before and had declared it to be some of the best they had ever eaten. "Well everyone, shall we cut the cake?" Kushina chirps, clapping her hands and tilting her head. There was a chorus of highs in answer to her question. With a big grin, Kushina reaches for a basic katana that was brought with the cake. The teens and children looked on with awe and curiosity at what was about to happen next while the adults that fought with her just gave off the energy of show off. Kushina got in her ready stance, and with a speed that only the strongest could follow, Kushina not only managed to slice the grand cake she made but also serve them on small plates for the guests. Despite the teens in the room having fought alongside her, they gave her looks of awe with mouths wide and stars in their eyes. Even Yahiko was giving off the same awe-filled look. The children however were the most enthusiastic, cheering at the wonderful spectacle they got to see. Kushina gave the blade a quick wipe down before setting it to the side so the blade cloud be cleaned later. No matter how fast you swing it, a blade will be dirtied by what it strikes. Keeping your sword clean was always an important lesson to remember. These were one of the many lessons the Uzumaki and Kuchiki clans taught their members when it came to taking care of their swords. "Ka-chan, that was really awesome," a staring Naruto exclaimed, "can you teach me that? Are you able to?" To her father-in-law's dismay, Kushina looked down at her bouncing little boy and gave him a bear hug. "Why of course my little Naru-chan. But you'll have to wait a few more years before we start your physical training," she said, poking his nose with her index finger. Rukia was standing close by, looking down anxiously as if she wanted to ask Kushina something, and Naruto nodded enthusiastically before setting down and going to get a piece of cake of his own. Kushina assumed she knew what her sister-in-law wanted, and as she rubbed her head, she said, Yes Rukia, I will teach you too. Rukia smiled slightly before she, too, went to get some cake. Byakuya handled Rukia's training, and her fighting style was more precise and composed than Kushina's, which was very offensive. When Rukia and Renji arrived at the table together, they both reached for a slice of cake that Ichigo was also reaching for. As both of their hands grabbed the plate, they looked at each other with a death glare, trying to use their glare to get the other to give up the slice of delicious cake. Just as they were about to start a shouting match, a calm chill overcame them, causing Renji to back away slowly while Orihime appeared to be praying for their safety. Byakuya was focusing his Ryutsu on the two behind them, silently telling them to keep calm and not ruin his son's celebration. The Kuchiki clan party went well. Naruto was sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms, and Kushina and Byakuya stood next to each other, watching their son sleep in his futon. Kushina kissed his son's forehead and said, "Good night, my little maelstrom." Byakuya then mimicked his wife's gestures by saying, "Good night, my son," before leaving the room to go to their own bed to end a fantastic day. Naruto's third birthday was celebrated almost 6 months ago, and the village of Konoha was bustling with the customary activities of its residents. A significant shift had occurred for the Kuchiki Uzumaki family. When Byakuya's father, Ginrei Kuchiki, gave him the clan head moniker, both of them became clan heads and Byakuya was permitted to wear the clan head's scarf. Ginrei and Byakuya had been working on this for months, but they decided that the elderly Kuchiki should keep the seat until there was no formal event coming up so that the transition wouldn't be broken by the seat being passed out of weariness. As its citizens went about their daily lives, Minato Namikaze, the Hokage, called a meeting of the Shinobi and Civilian Council to make a significant announcement. The clan heads and councilors assembled inside the Hokage Tower to await the Hokage's arrival. While they waited, the members of the Civilian Council tried to interrupt the clan heads' private discussions. Toshiro Urgura, a prominent textile merchant, said, "Ah, pardon me Kuchiki-sama. I couldn't help but notice that Uzumaki-sama is not with you. Is she ill?" Byakuya did not appear suspicious, but the question seemed strange. His father had warned him that a large number of the members of the Civilian Council try to interfere in clan affairs by any means possible. Since they consider themselves to be their superiors because of their council position, they frequently use politeness to insult the shinobi. However, since their position only becomes active when a meeting is called, it is meaningless. Other than that, they work at whatever job they would normally have. Byakuya's conversation partner, Tsu Minazuka, gave the man a covertly furious glare. Even though the feral woman had no interest in politics, she realized that she couldn't act boldly in such a situation without endangering the reputation of her clan. A composed Byakuya responds, "She is absent as she is taking care of our child." With a dismissive wave, the portly man lifts his hand. Byakuya and Tsu both understood what he was doing when he said, "I don't see why she does so. She should just assign a nursemaid and not dismiss her duties to the council." He would have responded more harshly if Kushina had done so, accusing her of being a poor mother for abandoning her son to attend the meeting. "While it may seem that way to you councilmen, my Suma will receive a briefing of the meeting from myself once this venture has concluded." "Ahem, I see, but if she is not here then how can we vote on an issue that requires action? Without her attendance all issues would need to be put on hold." Byakuya interrupted the man, "I can assure you that no wait would be necessary. My Suma has filed with the office of the Hokage that I am allowed to vote on her behalf should the need arise, as she is able to do so for myself." "Well, that seems quite unfair for the rest of us. You would automatically have 2 votes to whatever argument arises while the rest of us have only 1, said the vendor. The 2 clan heads thought, aside from the backroom deals that you and your cohorts make between meetings to simplify your votes. With the merger of our clans through matrimony, as well as the both of us being clan heads, it seems rather odd that you would bring up such an issue now. Especially after we have been married for 2 years and had been courting for a full year prior, said Byakuya. Toshiro grumbled, well, it had never been an issue until recently. This alerted the 2 clan heads and all the heads within range, particularly Fugaku. His own issues with the civilian council members stemmed from their attempts to arrange a marriage between his children and their daughters. He was also aware of the corruption that those who became civilian councilors engaged in because he was the leader of both the village police force and the Uchiha clan. But the evidence was hard to come by. He was also offended by the obvious criticism of his wife's friend. Byakuya had to be commended. If anyone were to speculate about this man's feelings for his wife, Let's just say that knowing how to use the Sharingan to give someone a heart attack was a fantastic ability to occasionally display. He is aware that something is about to happen. With this meeting, perhaps? Fugaku asked. At this moment, the doors opened, revealing Minato with his advisors Danzo Shimura and Hiruzen Sarutobi, Sandaime Hokage and head of the Sarutobi clan. Danzo was frequently regarded as a warhawk, but he always has the village's best interests in mind. Despite having one arm and one eye that need to be sealed to keep a Fuinjutsu mark from poisoning his body, the man is not one to back down when the chips are down. The man's last option was to use his sealed arm and release the seals that were keeping it from spreading. Although he was the more combative of the two, he would concede if his village would suffer long-term effects. In the shinobi world, paranoia was both a curse and a boon. He was also infamous for questioning the intentions of the other villages, which made him appear paranoid. Hiruzen was the more composed of the two, frequently speaking in a more rational manner and remaining silent until confronted with the prospect of overt animosity. Minato had both of them as advisors because his passive demeanor occasionally encouraged those who opposed Konoha to push harder to see how much they could get to maintain peace. The counselors stood in front of their seats, with Danzo leading the civilian side, which annoyed Minato as he made his way to his seat. He viewed them as bothersome people who, despite their practicality, never looked much farther than their own wallets. In his opinion, it was not worth having someone in a position of authority who could be bought to betray Konoha. Not to mention how their obvious disregard for the Hokage only served to fuel his ire. While Minato made his way to his seat, the clan heads and advisors stood, and some of the civilian counselors appeared prepared to return to their seats. After Minato sat down, the others did the same. Minato nodded his head slightly and said, "Greetings, I am glad you could all make it." The majority of the council room took notice when the speaker said, "I have called you here today as I have received a message from Kumogakur." Danzo inquired, what did the message entail? An Anbu placed the Kumo scroll in the middle of the table after Minato waved a hand. Minato gestured for the table to be opened so they could read the scroll. The clan heads and advisors were immediately alarmed by the statement. They wished to send an ambassador and an entourage to discuss an alliance. Through the foundation, Danzo has obtained proof that Kumo has dispatched shinobi to other villages in order to retrieve Kekkei Genkei holders in order to establish a clan of their own within their borders. In the meantime, a new market appeared to be open to the civilian counselors. Hiruzen inquired, have they stated their terms in this alliance? Minato nodded reluctantly. The clan heads and some members of the civilian council were placed on guard after they said, they have stated that they wish for an opening trade, though what they want to trade is left open. Your business partner will have more negotiating power if you don't know what they want from the trade agreement because you won't know what they plan to offer until the day of the transaction. Shikaku Nara questioned, there must be something else that they placed in the scroll. Minato gave a final nod. They also discussed wanting to meet with the clan heads to see clan compounds as a show of good faith. Danzo and the other clan heads were alerted by this, but Hiashi Hyuga was the first to express this worry. With a shout of, absolutely not. He got up. I agree, Danzo said calmly. Fugaku scoffed and said, they want us to show off our clans and let them into our homes as what? A sign of good faith. Please, Sum interrupted. Knowing Kumo, they want to use that as a means of scouting the compounds for their kidnapping of one of the clan pups that catch their eye, Sum said in disgust. Though some of the civilian counselors had something to say, all of the clan heads agreed with this sentiment. Pardon me, said San Mai, a slender twig who managed some of the village's bank's financial operations. But surely there is no issue of a guest wanting to sign an alliance to enter one's home for a quick tour. That wouldn't make sense, Shibi Aburame said. Our homes hold secrets that we guard very carefully as well as treasures that many would covet should they be granted the opportunity. Forgive me Aburame-san, but if your clan has such great treasures, wouldn't this be the opportunity to show them off? Replied Toshiro. Byakuya contributed his thoughts to the discussion. Our treasures are our own and we trust few outsiders to see them due to their significance. Unlike many of you, he said while staring at the civilian council member, we do not flaunt what we possess like it is some prized dog to be paraded as a means of demonstrating our social status. For that, we let our actions and skills convey that message. It is why the Uzumaki were feared as a clan and why the Uchiha, Senju, and the Kuchiki were so powerful before the hidden villages, said Acclam Byakuya. Fugaku's pride as a Uchiha being fanned by one as powerful as Byakuya made his heart race, and he smiled a little. Fugaku said, I agree with Kuchiki-san. There is a reason that our names are recognized and feared throughout the elemental nations. Our ancestors earned the prestige we now hold, and not just due to the artifacts they crafted. Through their accolades and accomplishments of their skills we have the prestige and reputations our clans are known for. Fugaku spoke as his arrogance filled the room like an ocean wave. Let's go back to our conversation, Minato said. For now, we must determine how we are going to handle the escort and their interest in exploring the clan compounds. The thought of allowing the foreign shinobi to enter their compounds made the clan heads all frown. If I may, suggested Hiruzen, can we merely show them their location within the village? This is something that any citizen in Konoha can do, so there should be no harm in letting them see the outside of the compounds with a passing glance. Danzo said, I disagree. While it is true that we cannot stop our citizens from walking by or visiting these areas if they have business with our clans, we are looking at foreign shinobi, and ones who are plagued by rumors of kidnapping young children in the hopes of adding Kekkei Genkai to their forces. For this I say they should be denied the ability to even see the locations. It was Byakuya who spoke next. I concur with Danzo-san. History around the mountainous village of Kumo has shown their drive in prioritizing more military strength and doing whatever it takes to increase it, as Maisuma would know all too well. With all due respect, Kuchiki-san, your Okusan had experienced Kumo's ambition during a time of strife. Surely, they would have changed their ways by now, suggested Jinrami. Many people who knew Kushina were suddenly relieved that she wasn't present because, if she were, there would always be someone to fill the void. That was taken very personally by Byakuya. He had a bad taste in his mouth after saving his wife from those Kumo shinobi and hearing about their less than idealistic plans for Kushina. But before he could say anything more, Danzo spoke. Unlikely. Thanks to what we have been able to glimpse of the civil war going on in Kiri, we know that Kumo has attempted to send in teams to take advantage of the chaos and grab some of the scattered Kekkei Genkai wielders. Thanks to this, Kuchiki-san's comments about their more militaristic tendencies holds true. Fugaku continued, they also pose a security risk. Having foreign shinobi as dignitaries going around and seeing secure locations means that there is a major chance for breaches to occur, as they will have more room to maneuver even with a 24/7 watch. The more room they have to move around, the more likely they can become a hazard. Some of the civilian councilors were prompted to compare this to being a poor host as a result. Hiyashi scoffed at this, but he did so in a more condescending way than was appropriate. Then you host a guest that has a history of robbing a person when their back is turned, and you can deal with the consequences. At this point, the civilian council stopped pushing the matter and became much quieter. At that moment, Minato made a statement that startled both his advisors and the clan council. Before the clan council could protest, Minato went on, I must partly agree with the civilian council. It would be bad of us to not show off our village, otherwise it could be seen as either a sign of weakness or mistrust against our guests who are seeking an alliance. The clan heads had to agree with some of his points, but they could agree on the steps he wanted to take to keep an eye on the delegation as they moved around Konoha. However, that does not mean we need to show off our clans' compounds. Instead, we can show them the bustle of the marketplace through a tightly knit escort with members of the Hyuga clan hidden nearby and watching them with their Byakugan to ensure that no maneuver is pulled to deceive us. With this agreed on and no set terms they wish to discuss, I say that we work on determining what we would like to gain from this agreement. Shikaku inquired, do we know when the delegation is set to arrive? They are set to arrive close to the end of the summer. That gives us 3 months to determine what we would like to negotiate for in this alliance, said Minato. The councils acknowledge this and begin working on the terms they wish to present in the negotiations. Kushina was spending time with her son while the council meeting was in progress. They are working on his calligraphy in one of the private study rooms once more. The young artist Kuchiki Uzumaki was making significant progress with an extra 6 months of practice. Kushina watched her son finish writing the brushstrokes for his first phrase, the will of fire, at a size that would fit the characters on an adult's fingernail. His strokes were obviously getting better, but he was having trouble with some of the trickier kanji. After putting down the brush, Kushina started reviewing his craft. Naruto looked down at his mother, not wanting to see her disappointment. I'm proud of you, Naru-chan. You did really good for your first phrase. I noticed you struggled a bit with wool, though. He looked up at her when she said, but that is okay. See, it just shows us what we need to work on. For today we will practice the more intricate kanji so you can write them more easily when you try again. Remember, for now it is not about speed, that will come with practice and repetition. For now, Just focus on making the correct brush strokes and you'll be a master in no time. Databane encouraged a happy Kushina. Her son returned the favor by becoming even more eager to give it another go. All right Ka-chan, and just you wait, I'll get this down and become a great seal master like you Datbeo. Although Kushina was crying, she was secretly pleased with her son's excitement. No, my verbal tic was developed by my little Naru. As a ghostly representation of herself sobbed and poured tears down her sleeve, she yelled. Naruto and Kushina took a break from his studies, which at the time included history, calligraphy, and chakra control, after a few hours. Admiring the serenity of the scene, the two sat on the walkway that overlooked the central courtyard. In addition to enjoying her son's company, Kushina was more than happy to brew them a cup of tea. "Nay, Ka-chan?" asked Naruto as he sat next to his mother, contentedly sipping his tea. What is it Naru-chan?" he enthusiastically said. "Well, I was wondering, can I get a sword too?" She pointed to herself with her thumb and said, I thought you wanted to be a great seal master like me." "I do Ka-chan, but I also want to be a great swordsman like you and Tu-san. I mean Oji Ichigo and Renji were telling me about this time you beat 4 platoons of Kumo shinobi with nothing but Sakashio. Then there was the time that you beat the son of the Raikage by hitting with a seal that reversed his chakra every time he tried to use it. They also told me about this one time where Tu-san summoned a lot of cherry blossoms with Senbon Sakura and even beat back the Gobi," replied Naruto with starry eyes. "Ah, it's so sweet that you want to be like me and your Tu-san. Well, how about this, when you are set to graduate from the academy then you can forge your own sword. That is around the age when all Uzumaki and Kuchiki forge their own sword. Until then when you get a little older you can learn how to use a forge so when the time comes you can make your partner." Kushina giggled into his mother's hand as Naruto gave her a questioning look. "You see Naru, when we forge a sword we put a part of our soul into the blade. This is especially true for the Kuchiki. When they forge a sword, it is what they see in their mind and heart imbuing it with special powers that are unique to the owner. In that way no two swords from the clan are alike. As for the Uzumaki, when we forge our swords, we imbue them seals of our own design as well as the seals that keep the blades from rusting or dulling. The unique seals grant our swords unique powers that no other has seen as well as seal them into regular-looking katanas so they are easier to transport, though your Oto Ichigo chose not to do this, instead walking around with his large sword like his from Kiri." After hearing his mother's explanation of their family swords, Naruto became even more eager to make his own. "Now remember Naru-chan, since you are both an Uzumaki and a Kuchiki yours will be extra special. You will be forging the blade you see in your heart and mind as well as imbuing it with unique seals that you design." His blood was pumping now if it hadn't before. "Just you watch Ka-chan. I'll do you and Tu-san proud when I make my sword," Naruto yelled, pumping his fist. Kushina herself extended her arm to embrace her son. "You already make me and your Tu-san proud Naruto, and don't forget it." The heiress was getting ready for the future she hopes to secure for herself within the confines of the Shihoin compound. The use of traditional architecture that was common both before and during the Warring Clan era was reflected in the Shihoin compound's striking resemblance to the Kuchiki compound. They were responsible for protecting the holy items, which were frequently created or blessed by the gods, before the time of the Warring Clan. Additionally, they have 4 of the 5 Raikuta Sennin treasures locked away, while the Kohaku no Johei, the last treasure, is still in Kumo. Although the layout was different, the compound itself was the same size as the Kuchiki clan compound. The entrance was located on the eastern side of the compound, which was oriented so that its layout stretched out in a rectangle from east to west. They had a smaller courtyard behind the first defensive wall, but they also had a larger entrance from the area that allowed them to welcome visitors inside the compound and a small courtyard that could be used for outdoor meetings without exposing the compound to visitors for routine gatherings. There were 5 courtyards beyond the compound's entrance, the biggest of which had a small gazebo, a sizable koi fish pond, and a shrine that was comparable in size to the Hachiman shrine in the Kuchiki compound. In contrast to certain other compounds, such as the Hyuga, the courtyard featured designated stone walkways for use as a means of swiftly rushing between buildings. The Shihoin clan's offices and meeting rooms were located on the western side of the compound, while the living and communal dining areas were located in the middle. The sparing grounds, smith shops, and dojos were located on the northwest side for those who did not want to eat in their own homes, while the theater stages for historical performances and plays were located on the southeastern side with learning and study rooms. It was also the location of the Shihoin's legendary vault on the whole western wall, emblazoned on the front gate and the 4 walls that comprised the front entrance's second line of defense. Cheer Haribel Shihoin, the Shihoin clan heiress, was in one of the study rooms with a few books. Under a white zip-up jacket with a form-fitting high collar that covered her lower face and long sleeves that ended just past her wrist, Cheer was dressed in her go-to black long-sleeve shirt, which was made of a breathable material for Hino Kuni's hot days. Her long white dress, which hung down to her ankles and was supported by a black hakama himo, could be mistaken for a hakama due to the folds in the fabric. She was wearing a custom white zori and a black tabi that was shin high. Yoruichi wore a black kosode with her clan symbol on the back and a white shitagi. She wore her hair in a high ponytail and a white, ankle-length, long-sleeved, orange-lined haori over her kosode. She was also sporting a white hakama himo and a black hakama, which would go well with white-soled knee-high shinobi sandals. It should be mentioned that she occasionally dons a black leotard with a turtleneck collar underneath. Her kodachi was tucked into her hakama himo. Kazuki had also dressed differently. Wearing a black hakama and white hakama himo with his sword tucked inside, he was dressed similarly to his wife, sporting a white shitagi with a black kosode that featured Yoruichi's clan symbol on the back. In contrast, he wore a black long-sleeved haori with large white diamonds embroidered along the bottom and a buff brown geta. In addition, he wore a bucket hat with green and white stripes that covered his eyes. The following day, after the 3 had returned from Naruto's birthday celebration, Cheer had a question for her parents. "Ka-san, how does one catch the eye of a boy?" Yoruichi asked, grinning broadly. Well, her husband Kazuki cut her off. "No, my little girl is too young to date," he cried, appearing out of nowhere and embracing his young daughter tightly while tears streamed down his cheeks. Before he could finish his tirade, Yoruichi kicked him in the face, sending him crashing into the wall. She then knelt in front of her daughter, put her hand on her shoulder, and started to explain. "Now dear, the important thing to remember is that, unlike civilian men, shinobi are attracted to strong kunoichi, not just beautiful ones. So, if you really want to attract this boy, you should aim for being the strongest kunoichi possible. However, don't let the chase rule you. Get strong and keep a friendly relationship with him. Remember to occasionally push him for dates and you will get him in no time," she replied with a thumbs up and a split smile. But Cheer had a question. "But Ka-san, is it not the boy who is supposed to ask the girl out?" "Usually yes. However, you were trying to ask out the son of a man that would stake his claim. However, it wasn't until Kushina dragged him on a date did the 2 finally start to go steady. Also, you are competing with 2 others, so the one who makes the best first move has the best chance of winning," says Yoruichi. "But Ka-san, should I not just claim him now to be victorious?" "Well, on this, I must agree with your father. For the time being, work on being close to him, and when you graduate the academy, then ask him on a romantic outing." Cheer would follow her mother's advice and strive to be the best kunoichi she could, even though she didn't fully comprehend her reasoning at the time. Cheer had dedicated herself to her training ever since the party, attempting to establish herself as a capable leader. Both of her parents were aware of the other reason the young heiress was devoting herself to her training, even though many clan members were pleased to see her taking her responsibilities seriously. While Kazuki denied his daughter's feelings, Yoruichi grinned at her daughter's slight crush on the young redhead Kuchiki. Penmanship was the first skill she focused on developing. She would frequently practice this by doing her best to rewrite passages from texts or scrolls. She wants the words in this exercise to be as clean and aesthetically pleasing as those in the text. She also decided to practice her knowledge of history. She was already reading books that covered a wide range of topics. Literature or history would be the best choices, and since the Kuchiki are very knowledgeable about history, Naruto might find her attractive in the future. She also requested training from her parents, but they only agreed to teach her chakra control because it is a skill that is safe to teach at any age. Although the Senju compound's layout was rather unusual for such architecture, it still had a traditional appearance. Although they still had the compound's boundary wall, they lacked a secondary wall. Instead, beyond their gate was a sizable, 2-story structure that served as clan's offices. It featured an open center and a rock garden where people could meditate. 2 additional 1-story buildings that appeared to serve several functions were attached to this one. Each of the main buildings appeared to be 2 stories tall, but they were fully enclosed with balconies that circled the top floors of each. From there were connected walkways to the rest of the compound that followed a more intimate layout of the clan. According to rumors, the clan kept its nickname, the clan with 1,000 skills, by using each building to teach a skill from both shinobi life, such as shuriken jutsu, kaiden jutsu, or bojutsu, and civilian life, such as carpentry, writing, or linguistics. The majority of clans that adhered to this style had numerous courtyards, each situated in between the compound's numerous buildings. In the northeastern part of the compound, the Senju clan had a sizable lake that contained 3 islands of various sizes connected by wooden bridges. Rangaku Senju Uzumaki, the current clan head's granddaughter, was in one of the spacious study rooms. Rangaku was dressed in her typical black and white shihakusho, with a few small variations. Her kosodo, which was still black and featured the Senju and Uzumaki symbols on the back, was paired with a matching hakama and thick, carnation pink embroidery that ran along the collar's seam. She also wore a hakama himo, a sakura petal pink obijime, and an eggshell white obi. Rangaku dressed comfortably and stylishly, just like all the women in her family. Konan had switched from her more formal outfit to a navy blue sleeveless top with a long piece that fell to her ankles and a tight, high collar that hugged her neck, where the Senju symbol was located. The top had a large hemline on the front, exposing her navel, the lateral part of her breasts, and her back. It revealed her navel, which was encircled by 4 piercings that matched the positions of a compass's 4 points. When she left the compound, she also wore nearly black leg warmers that matched her shinobi sandals. Under a green rope with the Uzumaki symbol on its back that hung just past his elbows and was secured in place by a white hakama himo with a black stripe through the middle, which contained his mask and sword, Yahiko wore a mesh, long-sleeved armor shirt and black anbu pants. On the back of Nagato's platinum gray shirt was a red spiral of Uzumaki. He had a white hakama himo around his waist that contained his sword and mask, and he was dressed in fern green pants that ended just above his ankles. Tsunade wore a gray, sleeveless kimono blouse with a grass green obi with the kanji for gamble on the back, a broad, Berkeley blue obi that held it closed, and a gray kimono blouse that was open halfway down her chest, exposing part of her bust. Her typical footwear consisted of black sandals with open toes, straps, and a noticeable heel. With an ivory white tamori secured by a plum violet obi, Shizune wore a black olive kimono. The front of the kimono was open, showcasing both her ample bust and the mesh armor shirt underneath, which was cut low to the top of her bust line and featured a burgundy red collar. Although her sandals lacked Tsunade's noticeable heel, they were nonetheless similar. Rangaku, who has their sights set on a red-headed clan heir, is currently going through one of the many lessons that a future clan head must go through. However, her family was taken aback when she expressed interest in the young Kuchiki Uzumaki. "What? My darling little girl cannot be interested in boys," Yahiko protested in a panic. "She is too young." "Yep, that's it, too young." Yahiko nodded. The sparkle in Tsunade's eyes escaped his notice. She patted him on the shoulder and said, "Why don't you let me talk to her, Yahiko? After all, a conversation like this requires a woman's touch." Yahiko made a remark in his hysteria that was best left unsaid. One of Tsunade's punches sent him through a wall, and then another, and still another, before he could finish, saying, "No way, haha. You have been out of the game far too long. Besides, what could you possibly tell her? Since you know you are." Tsunade turned to face her perplexed granddaughter as Yahiko was redecorating a building in the Senju compound. With a smug smile, Tsunade told her granddaughter, "Now Rangaku," adding, "One of the best moves to use on a man is to smoosh his arm between your breasts, it never fails to catch his eyes." Konan, on the other hand, had different ideas when she went in to see why her husband had almost reached the wall of the compounds. She knew she had to step in after hearing her mother's advice. Konan said flatly, "Oka-san, she is too young to be trying that tactic." Tsunade sighed and shook her head in her hand, saying, "Well, it worked on your 2-san." She looked up into her mother's eyes as they engaged in a silent debate about when such strategies would be suitable. Tsunade gave in after the 2 older women engaged in intense staring. Tsunade responded with a huff, "Fine." Everything appeared to be all right for a brief moment before Tsunade's enthusiasm returned. "When the time comes, don't be afraid to flaunt the girls a bit, that way he for sure won't take his eyes off you," Tsunade said, kneeling and placing a hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. "Rangaku dear," she said, giving her granddaughter a thumbs up. "And you can now become as large as at least your Ka-chan thanks to your genetic makeup. You might even surpass me in size, who knows?" She thought to herself as a smile that she wished to conceal appeared on her face. Konan established the law after sensing her mother's thoughts. With modesty Ka-san, she is trying to attract one boy not the whole village, she replied with sternness. Feeling that her motivations were being questioned, Tsunade responded. In order to give the impression that she was considering options other than the wager she made with Kushina, Mariko, and Yorichi, Tsunade added, "Hey, it's a valid tactic. Plus, it could help distract her opponents when she makes genin." She sighed in response, realizing her mother had a point. "We also don't want to overuse a tool or else he could become used to it," Konan said, glaring at Tsunade. "While I can't deny that," she said. Tsunade's expression changed to one of shock, totally forgetting that her daughter had consented to help Rangaku win the wager. Tsunade exclaimed, "You're right. Quickly we must brainstorm some more ideas." While Konan stared blankly. Meanwhile, Rangaku appeared excited but didn't understand what her mother and grandmother were discussing. Tsunade and Konan were exploring territory that would be better utilized later in life, so Konan had to cut them off. The sweet words, "Rangaku dear," were spoken by Konan to attract her daughter's attention. When Rangaku heard this, his eyes brightened. The best way to get a shinobi's attention is to be a strong and beautiful kunoichi. She listened to the entire conversation, but up until now, she had no idea what was being said. "Really Ka-san?" Konan asked, nodding. However, before she could say anything more, Tsunade added, "And beautiful. It's the strong and beautiful ones that catch the eyes of shinobi." Konan sighed and went on. "Yes, to help you have the best chance at catching his eye, your Ba-chan and I will be helping you become the strongest and most beautiful kunoichi." At this point, Rangaku was observing the stars. "Will I really be as beautiful as you and Ba-chan, Ka-chan?" Tsunade pulled her cute granddaughter into her chest and gave her the strongest hug possible after saying that. Tsunade exclaimed, "Of course you will, sweetie. And to help you become a strong kunoichi, your Ka-chan and I will start your lessons." Rangaku exclaimed with joy. Although his daughter was too young to start physical training, they started her studies because it would take a lot of persuading to get Yahiko to assist in starting her training. Rangaku continued to find these classes dull and frequently inquired about the start date of her kenjutsu classes. Yahiko wanted to go outside and work out, but Tsunade insisted that she wasn't old enough to undergo the physical training required to become a proper kunoichi. While Byakuya and Naruto were out enjoying some father-son time, Kushina was helping to tutor Karen Uzumaki, her niece. Karen was dressed in the typical Kuchiki clothing that they frequently wore, but since she was an Uzumaki, she had a red shitagi and a red spiral on her back. Mariko Uzumaki, her mother, changed into a kunoichi-style kimono with a white robe over top that was secured with a matte amethyst obi and featured a high-hem collar. In one of the study rooms in the Kuchiki compound, the two older women were discussing the subtleties of one's brush strokes and how it relates to the efficacy of a seal when Mariko noticed her daughter appeared to be distracted. The two women drew Karen's attention again. "Karen, is something the matter?" "It's nothing, Ka-chan," she said uneasily. Kushina's attention was drawn to this. Karen looked anxiously between the two older women. "Karen," Mariko said, putting a hand on her daughter's shoulder, "I can tell something is bothering you. You can tell me." As the silence continued, Kushina and Mariko started to piece together a potential explanation for Karen's behavior. "Karen, does this have something to do with a certain boy?" replied Mariko. To conceal her light pink cheeks, Karen turned her head away from the two women. Mariko sighed, and Kushina gave a sly smile. Yes," she replied, a little embarrassed. The two women agreed to let Karen take the lead in this discussion because it was obviously something she was interested in. Before speaking, Karen took a deep breath. The two women's responses differed at this point. "Oba-san, Kushina, Ka-chan. How do I get the attention of a boy?" Kushina became enthusiastic, while Mariko sighed in resignation. Kushina smiled in response to this question. Karen needed assistance attracting her son's attention. Although Naruto may not have specifically mentioned her, judging from her behavior at his birthday celebration. As Mariko sat on one of the study room's pillows, a thoughtful Kushina said, "Well." Mariko saw this as the ideal chance to make fun of Kushina while ensuring Karen received sound counsel. "The first question to ask yourself is he a shinobi?" Karen appeared perplexed by this, but Mariko understood the significance of the question. Kushina elaborated after noticing this. She said, her chin up, smiling proudly, "Remember this, Karen-chan, as it is a very important question. All shinobi love a strong kunoichi. I mean, just look at me and your Oji-san. Let's also not forget how you pretty much staked your claim on him by the time you were chunin and scared away the competition, Mariko chuckled. Kushina turned on her cousin. Hey, those weak and shallow fangirls only wanted Byakuya-kun for nothing but his status. A true kunoichi earns her own while seeking her future husband, said Kushina. Karen thought she ought to be making notes about this. Mariko giggled behind her sleeve and muttered, well, it also helped you were the one instigating the dates. Confused, Karen turned to face her mother and aunt. Karen questioned, Oji-san, Byakuya didn't ask you on dates. Kushina clasped her hands over her flushed, red cheeks. A giggling Kushina said, no, he was so shy to ask. So, I needed to be the one to take the initiative. Karen's expression remained perplexed. She simply couldn't believe her uncle, who was rumored to have repelled the Kyuubi itself, could be timid about anything. Karen asked, then how did you know he liked you? Kushina received a dreamy look at this. Oh, it was the small things. Like how he would sit next to me even if there were available seats elsewhere in the academy. The subtle looks at me if I wasn't Aohima hanging out with my friends. Mariko smiled and clarified, she means raising hell at the academy. Kushina was disheartened. Hey, we weren't that bad. With a dark expression in her eyes, Kushina crossed her arms and asked, says the woman that, alongside Anko, beat down most of the students in the whole academy. Well, no one called me that again, did they? Kushina asked, laughing. Not really the point. Anyway, a now glistening Kushina exclaimed. The more definitive signs were when other boys tried to flirt with me, Byakuya-kun would be there and give them a cold stare that made it seem like we were in the middle of a blizzard that he would keep on them until they left, she stated with a dreamy sigh. This great and all, Oba-san, but how does this mean that being strong gets me a strong shinobi? Oh, it means that you can protect yourself and any future children you would have. It also shows that you are interested in them for more than just their reputation and status and that you have other interests than boys, Kushina bluntly stated. Kushina put an arm around Mariko's neck at this point. I mean, just look at your Ka-chan. She was the silent one from our group back in the academy, but she studied hard and trained just as hard as me and Anko. Now she is one of the best seal masters and medics in the village database. Mariko chuckled and scratched her cheek in response to this compliment. At Karen's ear, Kushina whispered, that's also how she met your father. Really? Kushina nodded. Mariko whimpered, Kushina, don't tell her. But why not, it was so cute. Oh, can I hear the story? Please, 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 Karen pleaded. Kushina was bouncing in place, excited to share the tale, while Mariko looked sad and said, sigh, fine. Well, you see, back when they still taught basic fuinjutsu back at the academy, there was a cute boy that caught your Ka-chan's eye. Well, she must have done the same because on day one he sat next to her and gave her a megawatt smile. Well, by the time they started actively writing seals, your Ka-chan was well into her private Iryo Nin studies under Tsunade Oba-chan. So, and this is where it started, when they were drawing their first storage seals in class, they caught each other's eye and looked away quickly while blushing, messing up one of their strokes, chuckled Kushina. While the other pouted and rushed to her fallen prince's side and used what she knew to dull his pain. Of course, she didn't take away his delirium, so when he opened his eyes he said, she began to tap her chin and appeared thoughtful. Then, when your father went to activate his, it had blown up in his face, knocking him to the floor where he banged his head. Sweet Mariko, worried for her Prince Charming, she continued to giggle. What did he say, Mariko-chan? Kushina asked, recalling the memory with a hint of laughter. Mariko blushed as she repeated what her late husband had said to her that day. I thought I was sitting next to an angel, now I see three of her. This really must be heaven. Karen had a starry vision. Now she could see it. She would be there to assist Naruto if he was injured in a training mishap. Then, like her father, he would refer to her as an angel. After that, they would go on a date and become romantically involved. Here, she almost let out a squeal. Nay, Ka-chan, can you teach me Iryo Ninjutsu? Sure sweetie, but I think we should finish going through the basics for Fuinjutsu before we take a leap in that direction. You are an Uzumaki after all, it is important for you to know the basics at least. Karen sighed. But Ka-chan. No buts, young lady. Besides, some of the skills in creating seals can be used in operations performed by Iryo Nins. Like what? Karen didn't see the connection, but the Uzumaki's stubbornness would cause a standoff. Well, let's say you have a surgery that can only be completed by deft hands and smooth motions. Your calligraphy training can give you the skills to perform the hand motions necessary to save a life. Kushina and Mariko were told, it would be better to learn this now and use what you learn here in the future. The two cited Mito Uzumaki, saying, after all, what you learn from one skill can help you master another. Karen asked them to continue their lessons because she trusted their advice and hoped what they were saying was accurate. Byakuya and Naruto were spending time together as father and son while the women of the Uzumaki clan in the Kuchiki compound were talking about the past. The Shodai Hokage established numerous parks when the village was first established, and the two were seen strolling through one of them. The two Kuchiki spent some time meditating in the shade of one of the nearby trees, despite the noonday sun beating down on everything around them. Byakuya continued teaching his son patience while making sure he was shielded from the strong sun while many of the other kids ran around in the sweltering heat. "Chu-chan. Byakuya asked, opening one eye to see his son. Before responding, Byakuya closed his open eye once more. "Why are we meditating? Can't I go play?" Naruto looked at his father in confusion, not understanding what he meant when he said, "It's the sun. With its current position, it is not healthy for the exposure with no water to replace what we sweat out." Byakuya closed his eyes and grinned, sensing his son's bewilderment. Byakuya put a hand on his son's head and gave him a loving rub, saying, "It's to protect you and teach you a lesson." Naruto nodded in agreement with his two-san, but he still desired to play with the other kids. "When the sun passes in a few more hours, you can join the other kids," he said, observing his son's disposition. Naruto's spirits skyrocketed. Since the only kids he plays with are Karen and the other Kuchiki clan kids, he was eager to join the playing kids and could hardly sit still any longer. Byakuya was carrying his weary son home as the day came to an end. "Did you have fun, Naruto-chan?" Despite his exhaustion, Naruto nodded, appearing to be trying to catch his breath. On their way home, Byakuya noticed a tiny stand. He could get some for his son, even though he wasn't a big fan of what he was seeing. "Naruto, would you like some wagashi?" Naruto asked, glancing curiously at his father. "What is that, two-san?" A wagashi is a confectionery that is often ate with tea made of fruits and nuts. "Since you were so good with your meditation today, would you like some?" Naruto responded to try the new candy by vigorously nodding his head. Byakuya entered the tiny store, which had the appearance of a warring clan-era lunch joint. The owner of the store bowed to them as they walked in. "Welcome, Kuchiki-sama. How can I serve you today? I request a table and a small order of wagashi with a serving of tea, if it is not too much trouble." The man bowed respectfully and said, "Oh, of course not, Kuchiki-sama. Please take an available seat and I shall bring your order with utmost haste." Naruto was placed on the floor cushions on the raised tatami mats beside him by Byakuya. A waiter arrived with a tray containing a kettle and some wagashi for the two Kuchiki almost immediately after they took their seats. The server started performing a tea ceremony for the shop's patrons as soon as the tray was placed down. Naruto was fascinated by the ceremony and paid close attention to what was happening. The servers demonstrated their skill in their work by conducting the ceremony with practiced professionalism. 6 candies with different designs made up each serving of tea and wagashi when it was served. In front of him, Naruto examined one of the tiny, square, pink cherry blossom candies. A tiny holly pink petal with 5 points and a canary yellow center appeared to be on top. The circular, lawn green candy was his two-san's. Byakuya's had a bright red konoha leaf on top, in contrast to his own, which has a flower. A white porcelain plate with a sea blue rim was used to serve both dishes. Byakuya clapped his hands together and made an almost imperceptible bow of thanks and gratitude when the tea was brought to the two. Naruto swiftly imitated his two-san's actions after observing them, and they then shared the candies. Byakuya, on the other hand, preferred spicy foods over sweet ones. Naruto's eyes brightened. His taste receptors were activated by the sugar he was tasting, and the sweet taste quickly hit his tongue. Naruto would not have cared about his manners and would have scarfed down all of his wagashi if it weren't for his two-san. It's safe to say that he relished the wagashi stop. The two would return to the Kuchiki clan compound a little later in the evening. As Byakuya carried a weary Naruto to their house, Kushina fell into step next to him. "Did you two have fun today?" Kushina asked Naruto as she cheerfully glanced over at the two. Naruto responded with an energizing nod, despite his extreme fatigue. "Yes, Ka-chan. We spent a few hours at the park near the compounds. I met Sasuke and a few other kids. We spent a lot of time on the swings and the other things." After that we went and got wagashi. It was really good, shouted Naruto. Kushina gave her son a joyful smile. When the three reached their house, the couple put their son to bed for the day because of how exhausted he was. That is great, Naru-chan. I am glad to hear that you had fun. Kushina was strolling through the market district wearing her casual outfit, which included a long, loose-fitting fern green dress that fell to her midshin, lilac-colored shinobi sandals with a basket containing a storage scroll on her arm, and a high collar, almond-colored blouse with the Uzumaki spiral on the back. She was also humming a little melody. What should I prepare for supper this evening? Kushina thought. There were numerous dishes to pick from, including curry, gyudon, ramen, and sukiyaki. Then it struck her like lightning. She enthusiastically announced her idea to the world with a snap of her fingers. Oh, I know, I'll make everyone's favorite form of ramen. I can make Naru-chan's miso ramen, Byakuya-kun's spicy ramen, and my shio ramen. In order to get the ingredients she needed, she hurried through the market. The villagers frequently greeted her as Uzumaki-sama as she passed through the market. While some bowed to her, others waved to the clan head, who smiled back. She heard someone call out to her as she went to get peppers for the spicy ramen. She turned to see who it was and saw young Itachi with her friend Makoto. As they shopped, they were also dressed more casually for the market district. Makoto wore a red plum skirt, cobalt shinobi sandals, and a violet-purple blouse with the Uchiha fan on the back. She also carried a basket on her arm. Itachi was dressed in floral white shorts, midnight blue shinobi sandals, and a midnight blue shirt with a loose-fitting high collar featuring the Uchiha fan on the back. As the two groups closed to meet, she said, "Miko-chan." "Itachi-chan, how are you?" "I am doing well, Kushina-sama." "I'm doing good, Kushina-chan. Are you out shopping today?" She smiled warmly at Itachi and said, "Yeah. I am going to be making everyone's favorite dish for dinner today." "And aren't you adorable, helping your Ka-san with the shopping?" Itachi nodded his head and smiled a little too. "Your idea sounds delightful, Kushina. Do you mind if we join you while we shop?" Kushina exclaimed, "Of course not. I still have something to get. Let's not dally." With enthusiasm. As they strolled through the market district, the three discussed commonplace subjects like Itachi's training. The three eventually encountered more of the mother's acquaintances. Yoruichi was the first person they encountered, wearing her typical clothes. They then encountered Hitomi Hyuga, who was being escorted by a member of her clan's branch who was dressed in traditional Konoha Chunin garb. In one of the more contemporarily designed buildings, the group concluded their journey through the market district. "So Kushina, how is Naruto doing?" "Oh, Naru-chan doing great on his calligraphy. Yushi should see how well he is doing. He can write his name on a grain of rice," laughed Kushina. "We also agreed to help Naru-chan his chakra soon. As an Uzumaki, he will undoubtedly have large reserves, so we need to start his control as soon as we start his physical conditioning. Right now, he is with Byakuya-kun going over his basic academics." "I know what you mean. Right now, Fugaku is teaching young Sasuke the basics of nature transformation for his rite of passage," said Makoto. At this point, the other mothers started boasting about their kids' achievements. Yoruichi shrugged and crossed her arms. "Chie-chan has done well with academics. She is being taught by Kazuki in the sciences and maths, though she seems to try and find holes in his initial theories. She has a mind similar to his when it comes to analyzing whatever gets put in front of her, so I'm excited to see how she handles her physical training. I bet she'll be strong like me," she said with assurance. The other mothers were drawn to the statement. There are also 3 girls from the clan that have also decided that they were going to follow her around as her personal attendants, Sung-sun, Apache, and Mila Rose. She seems to just let them do so. So they have joined Chie-chan while she attends her lessons. Sung-sun is calm, Apache is brash and loud, kind of like Anko-san, and Mila Rose is somewhere in the middle of the two when it comes to personality. Sung-sun often gets between the other two when they start to bicker about something. "I'm sure if we get the kids together again, you will get to meet them." Suddenly, Hitomi noticed that statement. The others thought about it and said, "That's a great idea. How about a play date?" Yoruichi remarked, "I like it. We can have the kids meet at the Hashirama Forest Park so they can play on a day they don't have lessons," Hitomi suggested. "How does that sound, Itachi? Would you be willing to take Sasuke to play with the others?" Itachi answered, "Of course, Ka-chan." After settling on the specifics of the play date, Hitomi asked, "So Kushina, how do you feel about the Kumo ambassador coming to Konoha?" As silence descended, Kushina grinned and said, "Oh, I'm just fine," but it was more of a smile for when she was about to beat someone into the ground. "Why do you ask, Hitomi?" Well, you know, with your history with the village and all." Kushina said, "Oh, there is no need to worry, Hitomi-chan, I am just fine." Behind her, a shadowed figure visible only to the ladies displayed her Uzumaki mask. They all thought, it would seem that after all these years, Kushina still holds a grudge against Kumo for trying to kidnap her all those years ago.